Hello, everyone. It is once again 2FMR7, getting ready to continue with video 2 of my playthrough of the Common Route in the A Sky Full of Stars game. I have been looking forward to continuing, and so I hope you are ready to join me here. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm pretty sure that was bow wow wow, but Katoru got up, having spotted me walking unsteadily from the station. At his voice, Saya noticed me from the shop's sitting area. I stopped in front of Saya when she came out of the shop, but I couldn't say anything. Hi, I'm fine. I saw Hickory. Hickory was there. I nodded without saying anything. But it could have been a hallucination. Sorry, I'm going back to get some sleep. I waved my hand weakly and walked past Saya. Okay, you'll notice in the corner there, right corner, that it shows we're going back to elementary school. This game is kind of like divided into 3 parts, and it goes into some really, really long flashbacks. We only briefly went into one before. I believe that this one is going to be much lengthier. So let's go ahead and go back into Akito's past and see what there is to be seen. As I stumbled down the rough, gravelly asphalt, I suddenly stopped. And there was a bridge in front of me. Do I cross here? They just told me how to get to the school the day before, and I barely remembered it. Looking around, I didn't see another bridge to cross if I didn't take this one. I had 2 choices. The wrong choice meant that I would be late for school. Either I would cross over here, or I would keep following the river. I stood there weighing my options carefully. Then I heard the sound of light footsteps, and someone came running full speed from upriver. I jumped out of the way to avoid being bowled over. Then whoever it was blew past me and grabbed the guardrail as they nearly ran into it. Watch out! They hit it with so much force I was afraid they would go right over, but they seemed fine. That's when I realized that despite their violent appearance, it was a girl. She was wearing a red backpack. And I figured if I followed her, I'd make it to school. Just as I was thanking my luck, the girl stared intently down at the water, running below the bridge, not moving a muscle. Curious, I looked as well. Just under the bridge, I saw a cardboard box floating slowly downstream. Ah! There was a puppy in it! The floating box got caught squarely on a rock sticking out of the river's surface. The girl started running full speed, climbing down the riverbank. She must have been trying to help the puppy. The river wasn't flowing fast, but who knew how long the box would hang on to that rock? And the rock was out in the middle of the river. It would be hard to reach without a boat. The puppy seemed to understand its situation and started to bark like it was urging the little girl to hurry. Meanwhile, she searched desperately for some way to help it. Just then, a strong eddy caught the snagged box and shook it fiercely. It was almost washed away. The girl seemed to measure the distance between her spot and the rock, then reached a decision and set down her backpack. She stepped back from the waterline and braced herself. She set herself for a running start, but she fell flat on her back. because I grabbed her collar just as she was taking off.
何すんのよ
You'll never make it. You're not some long jumper, I said, helping her up after I'd stopped her from jumping into the river. If you fell in, you just end up catching cold, and that's not helping anyone, right?
でも
And anyway, even if you made it, how would you get back? There was no room for a running start on the rock. Here, move. The girl looked like she had more she wanted to say, but when she saw the drying pole in my hands, she swallowed it down and moved away. I'd borrowed it from a house nearby. I stepped on the water's edge and reached it out as far as I could.
頑張れもう少し
I held the pole in one hand and stretched it as far as I could, but it was just a little too short.
あんたは動くな
Hold on to my other hand.
お任せろ
I had her hold on to my left arm as I leaned out over the river, reaching out with the pole. No, just a little more. I hooked the end of the pole onto the edge of the box. All I needed to do was pull it in, but I couldn't get any leverage in that position. In fact, with all the jostling from the pole, the box was working loose from the rock. I won't let you. I stepped into the river and somehow got the pole hooked into the box, keeping it from getting washed away. Ugh! My arms trembling, I carefully maneuvered the box to the riverbank. Come on. The girl lifted the puppy out in her arms.
よかった
The girl hugged the dog, looking weak with relief. The puppy must have been terrified as well, because now it lay quietly in her arms. I flopped down on the ground, mind and body totally, completely worn out. I'm beat.
ありがとう助けてくれて
When she thanked me, I got my first proper look at her face. She was crying a little, probably from relief. When she'd first come running up like that, I'd mistaken her for a boy, but looking at her now, she was obviously a girl, and a cute one, too. And that expression, both smiling and crying at the same time, really seemed to suit her. We'd only just met, but she was making me think the strangest things. It was nothing, really, I answered bluntly. I was slightly embarrassed by the whole knight in shining armor thing. Is that your dog?
うん知らない子学校行く途中で流されてるの見つけて追いかけてきたの足大丈夫
The puppy and the girl looked worriedly at my pants. They were soaking wet. It's fine. It's nothing, really, I said, but to tell you the truth, the November River was really cold and my wet pants were freezing.
靴どうしたの
I didn't notice until she said it, but my right shoe was missing. I guess it got washed away. The girl jumped up and ran to look for it, but it was gone. I could bear the cold, but missing a shoe was kind of a problem. Ah well, when you considered it the price for saving a puppy's life, it was a good deal. Alright then, I'm gonna get going.
待ってよ
She looked back and forth from me to the puppy, panicking a bit. She clearly had only thought of saving it, not what to do afterward. I picked my stuff up from the bank. I shouldered my backpack in a long and cylindrical case. I'd better take the drying pole back.
待ってったら
Oh, that's right. Which way is the school? Do I cross the bridge?
渡らないねえあなたもしかして
Arigato. Jane. One bare foot, I turned to head to school. The classroom was filled with noise. The students all stared as I stood in the front of the blackboard.
何あの子なんで足濡れてるのちょっと怖そう
It was a small class, about 15 people. Each grade had only one class, but still, the whole fifth grade had only had that many people.
はいはい。みんな静かに。
Our homeroom teacher, Miss Sayatome, got everyone to be quiet.
空見くん、自己紹介してみよっか。できる？
She spoke gently, seeming to worry a bit, but I nodded. I'm Akito Sorami. It's nice to meet you. I tried to make myself look intimidating so that no one would mess with me. A boy who looked like he was a class bully stared at me, clearly not liking me already. And from somewhere else, a hand shot up.
ほうき星さん？
Even though it wasn't time for questions, the girl raised her hand so eagerly that the confused teacher called on her. The hand's owner stood up excitedly. Her vigor made her chair crash into the desk behind her, and the girl sitting there let out a small cry.
君、空見くんって言うんだ。私は光。ほうき星光っていうの。あれ？
I guess that she was waiting for me to react with, "Oh, it's the girl from before." But I just stared expressionless. I even tilted my head to the side a bit and looked confused.
急にどうしたの、光ちゃん。恥ずかしいから座りなよ。なに張り切ってんだよ、バカ光。
Since I didn't offer any reply, Hickory looked kind of silly, getting all excited over the new kid.
違うよ。今朝会ったんだよ、空見くんと。その時名前聞けなかったから。忘れられてんじゃん。だっせー。うっさいよ、タケ。はいはい、静かに。ほうき星さん、自己紹介は休み時間にやりましょうね。違うのに。みんなもほうき星さんのように空見くんと仲良くしてあげてね。
Everyone called out, "Yes, ma'am," in chorus.
真ん中の後ろの席があなたの席よ。
はい。
それじゃあ授業を始めます。今日は教科書の87ページから。
It was break time. As soon as the class finished and we thanked the teacher, I left the classroom. I couldn't stand the way everyone was staring at me, the weird new kid with the wet pants. Hickory followed me out. I started to walk faster, trying to get away.
なんで逃げる？今朝のお礼をちゃんと言いたいだけなのに。
Why would you thank me? It wasn't even your dog, was it?
そうだけど。でも助けてくれたじゃん。
I did it because I wanted to, so you don't need to thank me.
何それ難しくてよくわかんない。
I have to go to the restroom. Are you coming with me? Hickory stopped in surprise. An innocent look on my face, I entered the male sanctuary of the boys' restroom.
もう知らない。
Apart from that incident in the morning, I passed the first day of my new school problem-free. The girl called Hickory Hokiboshi was, unsurprisingly, the most popular girl in school. And judging by the way she tried so hard that morning to save a dog she didn't even know, she was a good kid. And it's not like I hated her or anything. I just didn't think getting stuck with a girl like that would be a good idea, since I preferred being alone. A girl like that would surely worry about someone like me all alone, and then everyone would start to imagine things. It's hard to explain how painful that is for someone who really wants solitude. Also, guys start to look hard at someone who makes friends with girls right after transferring in. That would not be a good way to create a peaceful school life. I had learned this all before. This was my 4th school transfer, after all. And that's how I started my new school life here. It was the next day. The same old thing started.
おい、空見。俺たちの仲間に入れてやろうか。
The guy who looked like the head bully was called Takichi Kusakabe. And of course, he was the head bully. He was the tallest in class and looked as strong as an ox. I raised my hand and prepared to speak. I appreciate the invitation, but I'm afraid I can't. I said it politely, like a gentleman would have, so as not to get on his nerves. Or rather, that was the plan.
なんだその言い方。そうだ、せっかくタケちゃんが仲間に入れてやるって言ってるのに。お前、生意気だぞ。
So much for friends. He probably just wanted me to be a bootlicker like these guys. I just prefer to be alone, sorry. I said with a super cool little smile. As guys, they should have really understood that smile.
なんかこいつ、すっげえムカつきよ、タケちゃん。
That was weird. It seemed like they didn't get it. In fact, it looked like it had the opposite effect that I'd hoped for.
これなんだ？
Takichi noticed the long, thin case I had beside my desk.
お前、学校に何持ってきてんだ？
He said and reached out for it. Don't touch that. Smack. I slapped Takichi's hand by reflex. Oh boy, now I'd done it.
こいつ、やっぱり生意気だ。
Wait, no, that was just...
もうらいい。
Takichi took advantage of my distraction and snatched the case. Hey, what are you doing? Give that back.
やだね。悔しかったら自分で取り返してみな。
His two minions stood in my way to keep me from him.
やめなさいよ、ダーシー。そうよ、そうよ。
The girls in the room must have sensed the dangerous shift in mood and started speaking up.
俺たちは転校生と仲良くしてるだけだっての。なあ、空見。
Whatever, just give it back.
やだね。
Saying this, Takichi unzipped the covering on the case.
なんだこれ。
He pulled out a white tube-like object from the case. Not knowing what he held, Takichi unzipped the cover and took it off. Get your hands off that!
ひかりちゃん、早く早く。空見くんが大変なの。どうしたどうした。またタケが悪さしたの？
One girl was pulling Hickory into the room by her hand.
タケちゃん、光が来た。女相手にビビってんじゃねえ。お前ら、ガードしてろ。
Seeing what was going on, Hickory slipped through the gap in the desks and rushed fiercely over to us.
ちょっとどいて。
うわあ、タケちゃんごめん。
The minions were routed and Hickory made her way to Takichi unopposed.
やっちゃえ、ひかりちゃん。
やるか？
Takichi put up his guard by reflex. But,
天体望遠鏡じゃん。
seemingly unaware of the surroundings or tension in the air, Hickory stared at it with gleaming eyes. Her burning gaze was fixed on the white box in Taki's hands.
天体望遠鏡？
そうだよ、天体望遠鏡だよ。タケ、これどうしたの？
こいつが持ってたんだ。
空見くんの？その入れ物、天体望遠鏡だったんだ。ちょっと貸して。
She grabbed it from Takichi and examined it up close.
ビッグ、なんて読むんだっけ？忘れたけど、この名前知ってる。
She couldn't read the English brand name, but was apparently knew what it was.
おい、空見。なんか知らねえけど、こんなもん学校に持ってきていいと思ってんのかよ。そうだそうだ。先生に言いつけるぞ。
I stayed silent and everyone stared at me. They all probably wondered why I'd bring a telescope, something you'd only see at night, to school during the day. I doubted anyone could imagine the real reason. But Hickory didn't seem to care about any of that. She just stared at the telescope jealously.
いいなあ、天体望遠鏡。私ね、お父さんに買ってほしいっておねだりしたんだ。でもダメって言われた。光は秋っぽいからダメだ。どうせすぐ他に欲しいものができるだろうって。私って信用ないんだよね。でもしょうがないんだ。前に買ってもらった釣り竿は一匹も魚釣れずにやめちゃったし、ジグソーパズルは3分の1やって止まってるし。
And I stopped my jigsaw puzzle a third of the way through.
ゲームも 全部クリアする前にやめちゃうし、宿題よく忘れるし、ご飯は残さず食べるけど、食器をシンクに持っていくのを忘れて怒られるし。
I always eat all my dinner, but then I forget to put the dishes in the sink and they get mad at me.
今度は本当なのって一生懸命お願いしたんだけどね。ばあちゃんが言ってた。一度失った信用はそう簡単には取り戻せないって。信じて欲しかったらいっぱいいい子にして、それで信頼回復しないといけないんだよ。
Hickory had an expression on her face like she understood well the hardships of life inside.
どうでもいいよ。お前が親に信用されてない話とか。
うん。
俺も同じことはこないだ母ちゃんに言われたな。
Hickory had given an incredibly detailed yet seemingly pointless account of her own fickle nature and how it made her lose her parents' trust. However, Takichi and his minions had listened, and it seemed to quell their aggression. And in the meantime, the bell rang and the teacher came into the room.
あなたたち、チャイム鳴ったわよ。席に着きなさい。
Takichi and his goons sat down, expressions downcast. Hickory returned the telescope to its case without the teacher noticing.
ねえ、今度これで星見せてよ。
She said, returning it to me. I just hooked it on the back of the side of my desk without saying yes or no. With things left like this, Takichi was sure to pick another fight over something. There had been some stupid teasing, sure, but to be honest, I was kind of relieved by it. Compared to my schools before this, the teasing had been almost amateur, if not downright childish. Actually, I figured that Hickory was coming around to poke her nose in and complicate things would be more of a pain. I hadn't made any friends. Of course, I wasn't trying to. I stopped trying ages ago. Besides, who knew how long I'd be here? I just went through each day, holding my breath, trying to ride out the storm. One day, when I was finally an adult and able to decide things for myself, I'd be out of this storm. But right now, all I could do was pray for the day to come soon. Things went on like that for a month. Everyone seemed to get used to me, the alien transfer student. The days seemed to gain some regularity and tranquility. Then something happened to shake all that to pieces. Another transfer student showed up. I started off the day searching the thickets next to the school building. When I'd gotten into school that morning, my indoor shoes hadn't been in the shoe cabinet.
ほんと、タケにも困ったもんだよ。後でちゃんとローリングそばとしとくからさ。
There's the first bell. We have to get to class.
うん、そうだね。
She said, but she didn't go anywhere. Hickory was poking her head into another thicket, still looking for my shoes.
おかしいなあ。あいつアホだからいつもだいたいこの辺に隠すんだけど。私も前にやられたことあるよ。ムカついたからあいつの上履き太郎の小屋に放り込んでやったんだ。太郎知ってる？早乙女先生んちの犬。
Is he really vicious? I blurted out.
うん、おとなしいよ。もうおじいちゃんだもん。けどでっかいんだ。
She stretched both hands out as far as they would go. If her sign was anything to go by, the dog must have been as big as a Great Dane, but she was probably exaggerating.
タケのやつビビっちゃって。私に泣きついてきたから、しょうがないから取ってきてやったの。太郎、私には優しいから。
I could see that Hickory was Takichi's natural enemy. If Takichi ever tried to bully a girl, Hickory would come flying in and rescue her. The girls in class lived in relative peace thanks to her. But most of the boys were too embarrassed to have a girl help them, so we had to watch out for ourselves. Having said that, even the worst of Takichi's bullying was pretty tame, just hiding people's shoes.
タケはヘタレだから、本当に捨てたりできないんだ。前に、よっちゃんの体操着を川に流しちゃったことがあって、弁償させられて、タケのやつ、おっちゃんにめちゃめちゃ怒られたんだって。因果応報だって、ばあちゃんが言ってた。
Hickory nodded and with a look like, that's just what I think too. but I wondered if she really knew what karma meant. We both dropped the conversation and focused on looking for the shoes.
ね
Hmm?
え、空見くんはどうして友達作ろうとしないの？
Hickory looked like she'd been wanting to ask this for a while. It's just how I am.
ほら、それ、なんか冷めててひねくれてる。
Her open expression cut right through me. But I kept cool on the outside. And?
そうだよ。そんなだから、タケたちにもしつこくちょっかいかけられるんだよ。もっとフレンドリーに行こうよ。例えば、一緒に望遠鏡で星見ようぜとかさ。
So that's what you're after.
ギク。
Hickory had been eyeing me and my telescope like a hawk. For such a normally fickle person, she was being awfully persistent.
いいじゃん、見せてくれたって。一度だけでいいからさ。
Hickory suddenly turned defiant. No,
なんでよ。理由を聞こうじゃないか。
I don't have to tell you anything.
どうして使わないのにいつも学校に持ってきてるの？
Who knows? She looked at me like she didn't know what to do with me. Forget about it, just go back to class. There's another transfer student coming today, isn't there?
そうだった。女の子なんだって。都会に住んでた子だって言ってたよ。やっぱりおしゃれなのかな。読モとかそういうのやってたりするのかな。
If you want to know so bad, shouldn't you head back to class?
そっか。じゃあ早く見つけよう。くそー。タケのアホめどこに隠した？
It didn't look like there was any way she was leaving first. I sighed and kept looking. We finally found my indoor shoes inside a storage box in the corner of the schoolyard. Just like Hikari said, it was somewhere with a roof, where they wouldn't get dirty. The shoes themselves were still brand new. But the bell had already rung by the time we got back to class.
やっばー。朝の会始まっちゃってるよ。
We could hear Miss Sayotomi's voice from the classroom. If we go in now, we're still safe. I'll explain you were helping me.
待って。
Hickory snuck to the back of the classroom and opened it soundlessly. Cut it out. I said shocked, but Hickory didn't listen and just peeked through the gap in the door.
Huh?
A girl was standing in front of the blackboard, and just like I had done 1 month earlier. But this time the mood was totally different. Unlike me, with my wet pants and a missing shoe, she stood tall, in clean clothes, staring at everyone with a kind of primness about her. But most of all,
サングラスしてる。大女優みたい。
she was exactly what everyone had imagined when they'd heard the words transfer student from the big city. The classroom was all abuzz. Even Takichi stared intently, completely starstruck by the sight.
毒もだ。やっぱり毒もなんだ。きっと。
What does that even mean?
うん。
I guess she was trying to say supermodel, but for Hikari it would probably had the same vague familiarity as king of or assassin. I don't know about a model, but her clothes, especially those glasses, were nice. Her posture was good. She certainly drew attention. I ended up staring through the gap as well.
空見くん、チャンスだ。
As soon as she said it, Hickory dropped down on all fours and slipped into the classroom. Hey! With no other choice, I followed after. With everyone focused on the new girl, no one noticed us at all. Hickory had been right. It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. I looked at the new girl through the gaps in the desks as I crawled along. For some reason, she made me nervous. Maybe it was because I was a transfer student like her. I knew it would be a huge deal here in the shrinking Mikuzeki village for 2 kids in a row to transfer in like this. It probably also had something to do with her unusual fashion. Her flashy city style really didn't match the old wooden classroom. But what I really couldn't stop staring at was the face behind those sunglasses. With part of her face hidden like that, everyone in class was probably imagining she was some great beauty. That was all just because sunglasses had a feeling of maturity, something unsuited to us kids, and it created an air of mystery about her.
はじめまして。
The new girl said with a touch of arrogance. A low whoa sounded through the classroom. Like everyone was shocked, she spoke the same language as they did.
私は天の川さん。その前に
Miss Sayotomi interrupted her introduction.
教室ではサングラスを外しましょうね。でもこれは。
Suddenly timid, the new girl started to protest, but Miss Sayotome just stared silently. The new girl looked down in embarrassment. She clearly didn't want to take off her sunglasses. And then...
先生、遅刻してきた奴らがいます。
Just as Hikari was about to reach her seat, Takeshi noticed her and called out in a mocking voice.
ほうき星さん、それに空見くんも。たけ、この野郎、誰のせいだと思ってるんだ。
知るか、空見なんかの肩を持つからだ、バーカ。
For a moment, the spell had been lifted from the classroom, and everyone was suddenly staring at us as rowdy as ever.
はいはい、みんな静かに。二人ともどうして遅れてきたの？違うの先生、悪いのはタケで、あいつが空見くんの上履き隠したから。
俺知らないもん。
あいつ。空見くん、どうして遅れてきたの？空見くん。
I stared at the new girl, not aware I was being called on in all the noise of the classroom. I stared because... she'd taken off her sunglasses. Soon everyone was staring at her like me. Our tardiness forgotten, the whole class focused their eyes on the same point. Her eyes.
何あの目。色が違う。
The eyes she'd hidden behind those sunglasses were two different colors. Her left eye was a deep blue and the right eye was orange tinged with yellow. Unlike earlier, now everyone was speaking in a low voice, unwilling to break the quiet as they turned their inquisitive eyes on her. She sniffed once and ran her hair behind her eyes, as if to shake off all the rude stares.
天の川さやです。
She introduced herself, but I'm sure no one actually heard her.
天の川さんは都会での暮らしが長く。
While the teacher gave the usual everyone be sure to be nice line, I continued to stare dumbfounded. I knew I shouldn't, but no one was stopping me, so I didn't stop. The new girl looked at me with doubt in her eyes.
何？
They look like Alberio. Your eyes look like Alberio. The new girl opened her multicolored eyes wide in surprise, and the next moment, tears started to well up. Those blue and orange eyes seemed to sink into sorrow as teardrops like jewels flowed down her cheeks. And at last, the new girl's face went completely red as she began weeping.
天の川さん？
Miss Sayotomi was thrown off by the unexpected turn of events. Sobbing loudly, the new girl stumbled out of the classroom.
少し自習しててちょうだい。教室から出ちゃダメよ。
Leaving us with those words, the teacher hurried after her. I stood completely bewildered in the clamor of the classroom, not sure what I'd done wrong. That day, no matter how hard the teacher tried to calm her down to comfort her, the new girl never came back to the classroom. She stayed in the infirmary all day, not leaving until school was over. Thump! I spun through the air and fell to the ground where I sat staring up at Takeshi.
転校生を泣かした罰だ。
I didn't answer. I just stood up and started picking up my stuff.
おら
One of Takichi's goons started to take my stuff, including the case containing my telescope. What are you doing? Without thinking, I went flying at him and reached to grab my case.
おっと
But Takichi got there first. Give it back!
なんでいつも学校に持ってきてんだよ。使わねえのに。自慢のつもりか
He said, waving the case around.
こんなもん
Takichi acted like he was going to throw the case. But I didn't buy it. I knew he didn't have the guts. He looked at me and clucked his tongue.
返して欲しかったら明日転校生に謝れ。お前が泣かしたんだからな。
そうだそうだおりゃ
From out of nowhere, someone appeared and drop-kicked one of Take's minions. There's one person it could be. Only one person it could be.
何しに来やがった
あれは意地悪で言ったんじゃないよ
はあ何言ってんだよ。こいつのせいで転校生泣いちまったんじゃねえか。
なんで泣いたのかはわかんないけどでも違うもん意地悪じゃないもんねえそうでしょ空見くん
はい
嘘つけ。あれは絶対いじめようとしたんだ。
っていうかいじめっ子はあんたじゃんあんたこそ空見くんに100回謝れ
やだね。こんな弱虫に誰が謝るか。
なによこれはあんたのせいで遅刻して先生に叱られた私の怒りだ
Hikari's rolling Sobat kick hit Takichi square in his backpack and he fell forward. The impact knocked the case he'd held to the ground. Hikari kept her combo going.
そしてこれは空見くんの上靴を隠した分だ
She grabbed Takichi's feet and spun him around with all her might. It was a giant swing, a really serious move.
うわお前絶対手離すなタケちゃん目が回る
Just as Takichi had feared, his feet slipped from Hikari's grip. Luckily, I guess, she hadn't been swinging him with much force, and they both just tumbled to the ground. I wasn't really sure what she had been trying to do.
大丈夫タケちゃん。そう仮名覚えてろよ。
Takichi ran away, wobbling to and fro from dizziness.
目回った
I helped Hikari up. Thanks, I do appreciate it.
なーにあんなのどうってことないよ
Hikari, probably still dizzy, flexed to show off her muscles and grinned. No, not that. Thanks for realizing I wasn't teasing the new girl. I said, averting my gaze in embarrassment.
あ
Hikari nodded in understanding and picked my telescope case up off the ground. She swatted the dust off it. And then...
ワン吉
Huh? Is that the puppy from before?
そこの橋の下にいるんだよしよし元気だったかワン吉
Hikari patted his head and gave him some bread left over from lunch. She'd said something about eating all her dinner before, but she'd probably been saving him some of her meals. Did you name him Pooch?
仮だけどね飼い主が見つかったらちゃんとした名前をつけてもらう
Aren't you keeping him?
うち社宅だからねえ空見くんちはどう犬飼えない
No.
そっかこいつどうしたもんかな元の飼い主にってわけにもいかないし
Hikari said deep in thought.
誰か飼ってくれそうな人探さないとどうしたの空見くん
None to deny. After starting to feel a strange empathy for the discarded puppy, I rushed to keep up my cool exterior. I couldn't risk weakness like that. Hikari stood up and turned to me, pulling herself together.
ねえ、アルビレオ見たことあるの？
Huh? Oh, sure.
綺麗だった？
Yes, it was. I answered Hickory's enthusiastic prodding grudgingly.
いいなあ。私も見てみたいな。
She muttered under her breath.
綺麗だったよね、あの子の目。空見くんがアルビレオ見たいって言った時、私すぐピンときたよ。あ、そうだ、いいこと思いついた。
Hikari clapped her hands.
見せてあげたらいいんじゃない？あの子にも。この望遠鏡でさ。そしたら私も見られるし、一石二鳥ってやつだね。しし。
She added this last line with a sly look.
きっと意地悪で言ったんじゃないって分かってくれるよ。明暗でしょ。どうしたの？
I can't.
なんで？
Because it's broken.
そうなの？もしかしてさっきので壊れちゃった？
Hickory rushed to open the case and examine the telescope. It looked fine on the outside. The case is actually cushioned, so it absorbs impacts. That kind of stuff was no problem.
ここも大丈夫そうだよ。
Look through it. Hickory did as I said and looked through the telescope. She looked at the nearby woods and the far-off mountains, tilting her head.
何これ？ぼやっとしてて全然見えないよ。それに景色が逆さま向いてるみたい。
Now do you see? I took the telescope from her hands and put it back in its case. Even if I wanted to show her, I can't, so let's just go.
あ、ちょっと。行っちゃった。
Tadaima! Glancing at me from the living room, my granddad turned off the TV and retreated to his bedroom. I've lived here alone with Granddad for a month. I barely even spoke to the moody, quiet old fart. Sometimes I wondered if he was just ignoring me, but I honestly didn't know. There was some yoken, sweet bean jelly desserts on the table. I guess that means I can eat some. I made myself some tea and set my notebook out on the table to do my homework. We had arithmetic today, and someone who still hadn't totally settled into class, I didn't want to be saddled with the title of bad student, too. And so I tried to concentrate on the problems, but... What was she crying about? I didn't mean to say anything to make her cry. Her eyes just reminded me of that beautiful twin stars I saw with my father long ago. I was totally confused as to how it happened, but I still felt guilty for making her cry. But she wasn't the only one who had been hurt. Such an important memory being taken as an insult hurt me, too. I'll apologize tomorrow. She didn't have to forgive me. I just wanted her to know I didn't mean anything by it. The next day, the new girl came to school. She wasn't wearing her sunglasses today. She sat in the back by the window, staring out at the scenery, her face tilted down. Everyone kept stealing glances her way.
ねえ、聞いた？天の川さんのお母さんの話。聞いた。駆け落ちしたって。声大きいよ。
Continuing to still looks, the girls gathered in closer and lowered their voices as they spread the rumors. The girl's mother had originally come from this village, but she ran away. Later, after her divorce, she came back home in tears. At least that's what they said.
悪いことして生まれた子だからあんな目してるんだって。だと思った。
They spread their cruel gossip in low voices, but Saya surely heard them. I mean, I could hear them just fine. But she just stared out the window, her face composed, and pretended not to hear them.
ちょっと、 私のお母さんがそう言ってたし。あんたら、お母さんが明日三日月村に隕石が落ちるって言ったら信じるの？信じるわけないじゃん、そんなバカな話。そんなの信じるのひかりちゃんだけだよ。確かに私信じちゃうかも。こないだもお姉ちゃんにトンビは鷹の子供だって言われて信じてたし。ダメじゃん。でもあんたたちが言ってるようなのは。
Now that Hikari had settled the matter with the gossipy girls, I took the chance to go up to Saya's desk. Saya caught my reflection in the window glass and jumped a bit, then slowly turned to me. I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm sorry I said something to make you cry. But I didn't mean anything bad by it. It's just your eyes. The second I started to talk about her multicolored eyes, her cheeks flushed and she jumped up. Then she pushed me out of the way and ran out of the room. Hey, wait! Takichi and his gang saw from the other side of the room, and their faces started to darken with anger. Crap. I left the room and started after her.
天の川さん、ここにいたんだ。何か用？ごめんね、クラスの子たちひどいこと言って。別に全部本当のことだから。いいんだよ、ムカついたらビシッと言い返してやれば。自分で言いづらいなら私が代わりに言ってあげる。私声だけは大きいから。ねえ、一つ聞いていいかな。昨日どうして泣いたの？ほら、急に泣き出したからなんでかなって思って。ああ、嫌だったら答えなくていいよ。ただちょっと気になっちゃっただけで。怪獣って言われたから。怪獣？私の目のこと。天の川さんの目を怪獣。もしかしてアルビレオのこと？違うよ、アルビレオは怪獣じゃないよ。そうなの？違う、びっくりしたの。だって怪獣みたいじゃない。確かにそうかも。ガジラ vs アルビレオとかありそう。でも違うよ、怪獣なんかじゃない。もっと素敵なもの。素敵なもの？ご覧なさい。あれが名高いアルビレオの観測所です。窓の外のまるで花火でいっぱいのような天の川の真ん中に、目も覚めるようなサファイアとトパーズの大きな2つの透き通った玉が輪になって静かにくるくると回っていました。銀河鉄道の夜だよ。知らない？名前しか。アルビレオは白鳥区にある天の川の流速を測る機械なの。私の目、機械なの？違う。本当のアルビレオは星なんだ。青とオレンジの双子の星。図鑑で見たことあるけど、すっごく綺麗だった。天の川さんの瞳によく似てる。よくわかんない。そっか。そうだよね。でも怪獣じゃないから、今度は貸してあげる。銀河鉄道の夜、すごく面白いからおすすめだよ。さあ戻ろう。朝の会始まっちゃう。
When they'd left, I came out of my hiding place. When I caught up with Saya, she and Hikari were already talking, so I hid. A monster? I couldn't believe that was the misunderstanding. Thanks to Hikari, I knew why she'd been crying now, and I felt a little better. Uh-oh. First bell rang. I hurried back to class. I washed the dishes after a quiet dinner with no conversation. Granddad could only cook simple dishes. I think the neighbors felt bad for Granddad living alone, so they often brought over stews and leftovers. This made up for the majority of our dinners, along with ready-made side dishes from the supermarket. Granddad left the room to take his bath. After finishing the dishes, I settled down in the corner of my room to read a book. Except I really wasn't comprehending anything the book said. I shut the book in with an agitated sigh, then reached for the cylindrical case that lay nearby. Opening the zipper, I took out the telescope. After a bit of fiddling, I opened the rear window just a crack and pointed it up at the night sky. Everything was blurry. I couldn't even see the stars. If only this telescope wasn't broken. Then I would be able to show her Alberio. Dad had shown me that beautiful double star only once when I was younger. Even though I hadn't touched anything, the image blurred even more. Everything was blurred so badly I couldn't tell what I was even looking at anymore. And that's when I realized that I was crying. I put the telescope in my lap and I wiped away my tears. Well, what the heck am I crying over anyway? I didn't understand it. Was it because I just remembered Dad? Mountain climbing was Dad's hobby. Sometimes he would even bring me along. Mom would usually scowl and say it was dangerous. I always felt like it was more work than play, so I never enjoyed going. This time we saw Alberio. We were spending the night on the mountaintop somewhere. Dad's friend who had come along brought out his telescope and they had shown them to me. Two stars nestled together, glowing orange and blue. The light coming from those two stars was the first I had seen through a telescope, and though it was simple, I was drawn in by its mysterious allure. Staring at the light from those stars dancing in the darkness, I had been transfixed, and without thinking, I had said, "Dad, I really want a telescope."
あっくん、クリスマスプレゼント何がいい？
プレゼントならもう決まってるよ。なあ、アキト。
I did?
天体望遠鏡さ。
あら、そうなの？
Mom looked at me with surprise. Yeah. It was true, I did say that I wanted the telescope. But I had no idea what had come over me at the time. I'm sure I just got caught up in the moment while camping on the mountaintop. Honestly, I really wanted a new game, but it seemed Dad had already made up his mind.
天体望遠鏡を買って、父さんと一緒に冬休みの自由研究やろうな。
Sure, that sounds fun. We had come down from the mountain and returned to our everyday lives. I forgot all about the elation I felt that night, and upon remembering it, wondered how I ever thought stars were interesting at all. But I didn't want to disappoint Dad, so I never said anything. In the end, they had got me this telescope. Suddenly, someone was banging on my front door as if it were a drum. Well, what the? That voice. Hickory? I wiped away my tears in panic. You could ring the bell, you know. I knew Granddad's house is old, but it still did have a doorbell. Did you need something? Honestly, I felt like I could use the company, so I was glad someone had come to visit. I didn't want her to know that, though, so I put up a gruff front so she wouldn't see through me. What? What was she talking about? But I wasn't lying. Even you saw it. The telescope was broken. My voice trailed off as I didn't want to admit the fact myself. As it did, Hikori gave me a puzzled look. I'm being totally serious. Hickory searched my eyes for any hint that I might be lying.
貸して。
I immediately handed over the broken telescope to her. She then proceeded to painstakingly look it over. After fiddling around with it for a while, Hickory grinned from ear to ear.
これ壊れてないよ。
But the images were all blurry and upside down.
先生が言ってた。普通の望遠鏡と違って天体望遠鏡は逆さまに見えるんだって。
Huh? Are you kidding me? Why would it show images upside down?
それでね、ぼやけるのは持ってて。
Hickory handed me back the telescope and started to unfold the pipe-shaped package at her feet. A tripod? Where'd she get that?
早乙女先生が貸してくれた。
Hickory told me triumphantly as she continued to set up the tripod. And yet,
よいしょ。あれ？これどうなってんだ？
she was really excited, but because it was dark, she was fumbling around a bit. Let me see. I gave her my telescope again, and I tried to set up the tripod instead. The telescope had come with a tripod when we bought it, so I sort of knew what I was doing. What are you going to do with this?
ここのネジに望遠鏡を。
It's too dark to see well. Can you bring me the flashlight by the doorway?
うん。
With Hickory holding the light, and after a lot of fiddling around, we finally managed to mount the telescope onto the tripod. We did it!
天体望遠鏡。
Mounted properly on its tripod with a single lens pointed toward the night sky, it certainly seemed quite impressive. Alright, so now what do we do with it? I asked her as an awkward thought crossed my mind. It was embarrassing that even though the telescope belonged to me, I didn't know how to use it without someone else's help.
ね。
Hickory picked up the whole telescope assembly and moved it to a more spacious part of the yard. Then, using a lever situated between the telescope and the tripod, she aimed the lens somewhere up into the night sky. She dialed the nearby knob while peering into the telescope.
おー。ああ、はいはい。
Hickory was muttering to herself emphatically. So, are you able to see anything? Or is it ultimately broken like I thought?
あ、見えた。
Found what?
うわー、見える。すげ
Seriously, what is it? What do you see?
ー。うわー。すっごい。うわ
This is my telescope, you know. Without thinking, I totally went and said it.
ー。しょうがないな。
With that deliberately exaggerated motion, Hickory looked up from the scope, spinning that dial as she did so.
Hi.
Despite really wanting to jump in and take a peek, my pride got in the way, and so I slowly sauntered over.
早く見なよ。
Don't rush me. Stifling my eagerness, I peered into the scope. Just like before, the image I saw through the telescope was blurry. Were my eyes just bad? No, that couldn't be. My vision was 20/15 at my last eye exam. So if that's the case, maybe I was doing it wrong. Like maybe there was a trick to looking through
見え
it.
る？
Yeah.
嘘ばっか。ぼやっとしか見えてないくせに。
How did she know? You did something, didn't you?
にひひ。
She giggled with a guilty expression.
ここを回すの。
Which one?
ここだよ。
Hickory guided my hand with hers to where the dial was located.
ここをね、ゆっくり回すの。
Right.
どうしたの？
Namdamanai. It would be embarrassing if she found out my heart skipped a beat when our hands touched, so I played it off. So like this?
そうそう。
Just as she said, as I turned the dial, the fuzzy images within the telescope began to slowly change.
だんだんピントが合ってくるから。どう？
はい。
ああ、じゃわかんないよ。どうなの？見えた？
I can see it. I answered her quietly, my voice shaking as my breath hitched. Hey, so is this... Like waking from a dream, the haze lifted from the image, revealing an otherworldly landscape so different from Earth. Is this the moon? I could see a clear image in the distant hills and valleys created by the craters.
そうだよ。だって望遠鏡はお月様に向いてるもん。
Still, it didn't look at all like the moon that I knew. What I saw wasn't at all like the glowing yellow disk I usually looked up into at the night sky. Looking at the bumps and valleys of the waning moon, they were so stark against the surface. I felt as if I were looking at the exact same soil that I was currently standing on. On the other side of the vast separation of space, there was soil. I never knew the moon was so uneven. I always had thought of it like a really big version of a light bulb. It's not as if I had known there was soil on the moon. It was hard to compare the image of the moon that we see on TV or in books to the sphere we see glowing in the night sky. There were rocks on the moon, mountains, bases, and surfaces that reflect light and make shadows. The delineation between the darkened surface and the surface illuminated by the sun was exceptionally vivid.
早乙女先生が言ってた。月を見るなら今夜あたりが見頃だろうって。満月よりもちょっと欠けてる方が影ができていいんだって。どうしたの？
Hikari asked me, a little impatience showing in her voice. That was when I noticed it. That my vision had gone blurry again. But this time it wasn't because the telescope was broken, or that I couldn't get it into focus. It was because I was crying.
なんで泣いてるの？
Despite being caught off guard, Hikari was concerned. Tears poured down my face, all thoughts of being embarrassed about crying long forgotten. I was supposed to see this with Dad. Dad and I were going to do an observation project together. We were going to use his telescope and... Sobbing, I started talking about things I'd never told anyone before. I actually wanted something else, but Dad really wanted me to see the stars, and so I put up with it, but in the end we didn't get to see them because both Dad and Mom died before we could go. Like my tears, I couldn't stop my rambling. Feelings that I had hidden deep in my heart were welling up and pouring out with my tears. I lost both Mom and Dad in an accident. I was taken in and let go by so many family relatives over and over again until I was finally brought here. Everyone ignored how I felt about it all. Throughout those tumultuous times, I lost a great deal of things. One by one they were lost. Important things, not so important things. The baseball glove that Dad had bought me. The scarf that Mom had knitted for me. Clothes and shoes that I had outgrown. The water canteen and backpack I had used when we hiked up on the mountain. My favorite baseball cap. My bicycle. My family photo album. With every item I lost, I also lost a memory. And with each memory lost, my heart broke all that more. Whether it was fun or sad or happy or angering, it was like I was just waiting for the future, whether tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, or just any time that I could look forward to. One by one, I lost every fragment that made up who I was. Everything's just gone. It's like having a pocket with a hole in it. As you continue walking, you end up dropping more and more things out of it. But there's just one thing that I've got left. I raised my hand to my telescope as I said that. Though I may have lost the tripod that we brought with it, I still had this telescope with me. It was the proof I needed. It was a single piece of evidence that tied the present me, who had lost almost everything, with the me that had lived happily with both his parents. Sometimes I feel like everything that happened at the time was just an illusion or a dream. But when I get like that, this telescope reminds me that there was all real, it all happened. That the good times I spent with Mom and Dad really did happen. That's why I can't lose this. I brought it to school with me every day because of that reason. I felt uneasy if it wasn't with me, even though I didn't even know how to use it.
大切なものだったのに。
She said it so apologetically. I'm sure she regrets pestering me so badly to see it. I shook my head to reassure her it was okay. Honestly, it was really painful. Even though I say that it's proof of my memories, I really hadn't made any with it at all. The only reason I treasured this telescope was because it just happened to be the only thing I had managed to keep. That was it. But I had no choice but to hold on to it. I had to convince myself that it was something important. Is there anything in there? Isn't this just some plain old empty tube? It was so painful to have that doubt lingering in the corner of my mind. I gripped my shirt above my heart, scrunching the fabric in my grasp as I recalled the pain. But I guess that wasn't the case, huh? It wasn't just an empty tube. The moment I realized that fact, I was overwhelmed with tears.
空っぽなんかじゃないよ。それどころかすごいものだったよ。覗くだけで月にまで手が届きそうなくらい。
As she excitedly told me that, Hikari spread her arms wide toward the night sky. I couldn't help but chuckle at seeing her enthusiasm. Drying my tears, I looked up into the telescope again. It really did seem like I could reach out and touch the moon. I'm sure this is what Dad had wanted to show me. A vast and beautiful world full of drama and mystique stretched out before me. It was there, at the opposite end of this last remaining piece of hope, my telescope. And now, knowing the true meaning, I was able to make the connection between the me who had only known happiness and the current me. Thanks, Hikari.
私がやりたいからやっただけ。だから君に感謝されることじゃない。
After saying that with a dismissive look on her face, Hikari laughed jokingly.
なんてね。
I couldn't help but laugh. That was the exact same thing I had said to her the first day I transferred in. Sorry for being such a jerk before. I never made any friends because I was always transferring schools.
それも昨日までの話だね。
What do you mean?
だってもういるじゃん、友達。
She smiled as if to say, "It's me." I couldn't help but laugh again. The sight of her self-confident expression was too amusing. It really had been a long time since I had laughed like this. It was such an interesting thing. I had cried and openly talked about such personal things, but now I was here laughing genuinely with her. I don't think that it was possible to expose my feelings like this anymore. I thought I had built a strong shell to protect myself from the loneliness. I had spent years hardening this protective shell, and yet it was so quickly breached and broken. Stargazing brings out the kinder side in people. If only everyone could feel the small bit of light from deep, deep in space, I'm sure the world would be a much more peaceful place. I want you to remember that faint light. Grow up to be the kind of person who sees that light that others cannot. I spoke aloud the words that floated up from the depths of my memory. That's what my father said to me when he bought me this telescope. That shining light might have been you, Hikari. Hikari was taken aback and blushed profusely.
やだな。私そんないいもんじゃないよ。
Hikari hung her head after her expression of disbelief faded.
もう照れるじゃんか。でも私知らなかったよ。星を見るとみんな優しくなるんだね。
Yeah, well, it was something my dad had told me, but I'm not sure whether it's true or not.
いや、なるよ。私今いつもより優しい気持ち。
It seemed that Hickory completely believed what my dad had said, and was looking at me with a reverent gaze. I couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed and flattered. Dad also told me, "Don't fear the darkness, because though the night is dark, the stars shine dazzlingly bright." But that one is a little more confusing, and I'm not sure what he meant. Hickory nodded in agreement.
そうだね。哲学的だね。でもよかったね。
What is?
これで天の川さんに見せてあげられるじゃん。アルビレを。
That's right, my telescope wasn't broken.
きっとびっくりするぞ。
With an excited expression, Hickory once again looked into the telescope.
あれれ、
What's wrong?
月がいなくなっちゃった。
Hmm? Even though we hadn't moved the telescope, the moon had somehow disappeared. You're right.
なんでだろう。
Maybe it's because the moon moved?
だって
At first, Hickory looked at me incredulously, but then it seemed as if she had quickly realized something.
そっか。お月様って動いてるんだ。
Even though it was something so obvious, she had said it as if it were a huge discovery. Up until now, we had never really been aware that the moon was actually moving. Looking up at it normally, it still seems to be still, but when we look at it with a telescope, we can tell it's moving little by little.
すごいね。天体望遠鏡。
Hi. It was like we had seen the hidden side of the world, and we nodded together in astounded agreement. That night, the two of us had actually confirmed one of the mysteries of space. We had witnessed with our own eyes that the moon was in constant motion. That night, the two of us stayed up late while stargazing with my telescope. All the while, we felt the thrill of being accomplices in uncovering the secrets of the night. It was morning, and standing in front of the classroom door here at school, I let out a long sigh. Hikari had come over to my house last night, and we looked at the moon through my telescope together. It was such a wonderful experience. How long has it been since something so emotional and dramatic made my heart beat so fast? My heart was still racing from the thrill I'd felt as I gazed at the lunar landscape with her. And yet, I'd made a shameful mistake while I was caught up in the moment. I'm sure this is what Dad had wanted him to show me. A couple of students walking nearby flinched in surprise as I threw my arms around my head in my outburst. What the heck was I up with this woe is me attitude? The embarrassment of remembering was enough to make me want to throw myself out the window. But Hikari had quietly listened to me talk about all that. I wondered what she really thought of me then. How the heck do I face her after that? As I was fidgeting in front of the classroom.
すごいんだよ。望遠鏡ってさ。
Huh? I overheard a very excited voice speaking.
そう、見せてもらったの。昨日家に遊びに行ったんだ。
I was certain that she was talking about me. Better head to the restroom first. Right as I turned around, there was Saya, who had just arrived at school. She flinched, startled by my sudden movement, and looked up at me with alarm reflected in her multicolored eyes. Tears began swimming in Saya's face. No escape. I faced forward again and entered the classroom.
月ってデコボコしてるんだよ。知ってた？山とか谷とかがあってね、ゴツゴツした感じ。嘘だ。ツルツルしてるじゃん。嘘じゃないって。私この目で見たもん。ウサギいた？ いたかもしれない。いた。ぴょんぴょん跳ねてた。
There was no bunny, I retorted without thinking. I tried to avoid eye contact by turning away, but I was too late.
アキト、おはよう。今なんて。
The girls in the classroom all glared at me in surprise after hearing that Hickory had hung out with me the other day. Morning, Hickory.
名前で呼び合ってる。昨日の夜、何かあったんじゃない？あの二人。
The girls started to whisper among themselves, like we were up to something taboo. It felt like there was a huge misunderstanding on the rise. While we were looking at the moon together last night, Hickory suddenly sprang this conversation on me.
空見くんってなんか長くて呼びにくいな。アキトって呼んでいい？
That's fine with me.
私のことも光って呼ぶんだよ。
What?
ほうき星さんって超長いじゃん。聞いてるこっちもなんかまどろっこしいんだよね。
Well, yeah, I guess not.
友達ランクさらにアップだね。
And so we decided that we'd spend time together outside of school too. Although, truthfully, I wasn't really used to the idea yet.
どうしたのアキト？風邪でもひいた？
Namdamanai. I watched her expression carefully as I answered. It didn't seem like my emotional debacle last night was affecting her in any way. I felt a little relieved.
今ね、昨日のこと話してたんだ。みんなも見たいって、お月様。
When I had come into the classroom, I was too busy worrying about what to do. I hadn't noticed that the way my classmates saw me had changed from yesterday. I wouldn't go so far as to call it respect, but it was something along those lines. At least they weren't looking at me all confused like I was some kind of alien anymore.
だからさ、やろうよみんなで。天体観測会。天体観測会？なにそれ？難しそう。全然難しくないよ。天体望遠鏡で星を見るの。それだけ。ね、いいよね、アキト。
I caught a quick glance of Sayo, who was sitting by the window staring at the scenery outside and keeping away from the classroom commotion. She had always been a little unapproachable, like she tended to put up walls between herself and others. Sure, sounds good to me.
アキトもこう言ってるし、いいよね。いいけど。
Despite their half-hearted responses, Hickory and I looked at each other with knowing glances. We had predicted this kind of back-and-forth discussion last night, but it seemed like the first step to our grand scheme was a success.
クラスで天体観測会をしたい？
It was lunchtime. After Hickory and I devoured our lunches, we interrupted Miss Sayatome's lunch to tell her all about the idea in the hallway.
昨日ちゃんと月が見えたのね。見えたよ。ありがとう先生。すっごく感動したんだ。
Though we lacked the vocabulary to adequately express ourselves, it was easy to tell by our expressions how moving it was for us.
そう、よかったわね。
Miss Sayatome replied to Hickory and then turned and smiled gently at me. I felt my cheeks flush, so I lowered my head to hide my face.
だからね、みんなにも見せてあげたいんだ。そうね。
Sensei once again glanced at my expression. This time it seemed she was a little worried. Since Sensei was our homeroom teacher, I'm sure she noticed that I'd had a hard time fitting in this past month since I transferred schools.
どんな星が見たいか、もう決まっているの？
Alberio, I called out suddenly. I'd really like for everyone to see Alberio. Our teacher looked a little surprised, but she quickly nodded her head in agreement.
いいわ。じゃあ今日の終わりの会でみんなに提案してみましょう。やったー！観測の計画は2人に任せてもいいかしら。計画って何するの？天体はいつでもそこにあるわけじゃないわ。 少しずつだけど動いているの。
Hickory nodded her head with a I already knew that expression on her face.
いつどうすればその星が見られるかちゃんと調べておかないといけないわ。できる？
As if on cue, our eyes met in agreement.
やりたい。
Miss Sayatome gave us a smile.
よし任せたわよ、二人とも。計画ができたら先生にも教えてちょうだい。うん、わかった。
Arigato, sensei. I called her by her first name without thinking. Though she was slightly taken aback at first, she chuckled.
頑張って。
With that, she gave me an encouraging pat on the shoulder. I felt a gentle and warm feeling bubbling inside me. It had been so long since I'd had an adult expecting anything like this from me.
行こう、アキト。
はい。
どこ行くの？図書室。
And with that, we took off toward the school library.
ほら、廊下は走っちゃダメよ。
At the class meeting, it was decided that we would hold a Stargazers meetup. We'd expected that Takichi would complain, so it was a good thing we had explained it all to Miss Sayatome beforehand. As soon as Miss Sayatome said that it was a good idea, the decision was unanimous. We moved on to the planning stage of our event.
おばちゃん。
After school, Hickory took me to a local candy shop on the way home. Next to Mikazuki Station, there were many small shops that lined the street. The sign of this shop read Sayatomi.
いらっしゃい、ひかりちゃん。
Calling out to Hickory, a little old stout lady emerged from the back of the shop. A puzzled look crossed her face when she saw
見
me.
かけない子だね。もしかして君が空見明人くんかい？
Hi. How did she know my name?
見張るから聞いてるよ。ちょっと強情だけど面白い子がクラスに入ったって。
Mihiru. Oh!
おばちゃんは早乙女先生のお母さんなんだよ。
This lady is Sayatome Sensei's.
よく似てるだろ？あの子、私に似て美人だから。
Granny said before letting out a hearty cackle. I could only nod meekly in reply.
いつも娘が世話になってるわね。あの子、学校でちゃんとやってるかい？
うん、やってるよ。みんな先生のこと大好きだもん。ね、アキト。
Oh, hi. Suddenly I blushed and started to fidget.
あのね、アキトはね。
Hikari proceeded to talk the old lady's ear off about various topics.
へえ、そうなのかい。
Granny gave me a deliberately surprised look.
こんな男前、あの子にはもったいないよ。
What did she just say?
いつものやつある？
はいよ、取ってくるから待っといで。
As Granny disappeared into the back, Hickory headed over to the large dog lounging on the side of the shop.
タロー。
Brr.
The dog lazily turned his head toward Hickory. So, this is Taro. He was huge. From the looks of him, I was sure he had German Shepherd blood somewhere in his mutt heritage.
怖くないよ。ほら。
To prove her point, Hickory leaned down and gave Taro a big hug.
タロー。よしよし。
It sounded like he's growling.
うん。あんまり構いすぎると吠えるんだ。アキトも撫でてやりなよ。
I think I'll pass. Arigato. Despite being an old dog, he had a glint to his eye and an edge to his growl that warned me he was serious. I felt a little sorry for Takichi after thinking about how he must have apologized to Hikari after she'd thrown his indoor shoes into his doghouse.
ひかりちゃん。
はーい。
はい、これ、パンの耳。
ありがと
いつもこんなのもらって帰ってどうするんだい？
う。ちょっとね。
Hikari looked so happy as she took the bag stuffed full of bread crusts from Granny.
それと、これ、お食べ。
She gave each of us a pork bun.
いいの？
サービスだよ。新しいお客さんを連れてきてくれたからね。その代わり、ミハルをあんまり困らせないでやっておくれよ。
任せといて。
Hickory answered happily. In reality, the top two troublemakers in our class would have been Hickory and Takichi.
ありがとうおばちゃん。
Arigatou
気
gozaimasu!
をつけて帰るんだよ。
得したね。
Hi! Taking our extra large pork buns with us, we settled ourselves underneath the bridge and cracked open our books. It was the book we had borrowed from the school library during lunch break. At our feet was... Pooch was happily munching away on the bread crust that Hickory had brought us. The crusts were leftovers from the nearby bakery that Granny Sayatomi had picked and to give Hickory. That was how Hickory was able to get food for this little guy.
どう？おいしいでしょ。
Hi, oishi. My expression became serious as I answered. I had eaten pork buns from convenience stores before, but this one was on a whole different level of flavor. It was stuffed full of filling, and when I took a bite, my mouth overflowed with its delicious aroma. It was the first time in my life I had eaten something so delicious. Thoughts like that were overwhelming, and yet I knew that I couldn't really be the case. If I had thought about it, Mom's cooking had been really delicious too. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed the taste of food. I just didn't have the luxury of feeling that way. Although now I could say the opposite is true. I thought that as I watched the steam rise from the extra large pork bun,
あった。
Hickory held open the book in her lap. At her exclamation, I looked down at the chart on the page that Hickory had turned to. It showed an illustration of the Cygnus constellation next to real photos of the night sky. Underneath them all was a picture of the set of orange and blue twin stars.
アルビレオって白鳥座のくちばしなんだ。
We had borrowed all of the books we could carry related to the stars from the school library. Since we hardly knew anything about the stars or astronomy in general, we had no idea which books we should read.
アルビレオは二重星なんだって。なんだろう、二重星って。
It explains that here. Albireo is a star that appears to be a single star to the naked eye, but shows two closely nestled stars when viewed through a telescope. These types of astronomical phenomenon are known as double stars. Visual double stars only appear to be double when viewed from Earth, however. The stars are actually nowhere near each other. When the two stars are actually in close proximity, they form what is known as a binary star. Hikari looked up at the sky. Although we really wanted to see what Albireo would look like, we knew the weather had to be clearer to do so. Pooch let out a whine and looked up at Hickory, who was engrossed in the diagrams of the book.
もう食べちゃったの？それで全部なんだ。ごめんよ。
I quietly opened my backpack and took out the milk I had inside. I then went to Poochie's makeshift house under the bridge and brought out his food dish. Hickory spoke as I began pouring milk into it.
そのお皿、アキトが持ってきたやつだったんだ。
I felt my face begin to flush, though I tried to keep a neutral expression. I don't like milk, besides... I just wanted to help this little guy out. It's my duty, right? When I found out that Hickory was bringing back food for Pooch, I had been saving milk for my school lunches to give to him. Saying that I hated milk was a lie, by the way. If anything, I actually really loved it. With a happy bark, Pooch began eagerly lapping the milk up from the dish. Hickory laughed at saying that.
やっぱ優しいね、アキトは。初めて会った時から思ってたけどさ。
I don't think that's true. I answered her pretty bluntly, but Hickory laughed like she knew better. I felt giddy as my heart fluttered a bit in my chest. Perhaps the grumpy-looking Taro had also felt this way when Hickory had hugged him. So, Hickory, do you like Night on the Galactic Railroad? Wanting to change the topic, I asked her about something I'd always been curious about. She looked at me as if to ask, "How did you know?" "I overheard you that time when you were talking to Saya. I thought that maybe that was the reason that you were interested in the stars or something." I had always wondered what made Hikari so interested in stargazing. And it wouldn't be strange for someone to acquire an interest in the stars because they liked Night on the Galactic Railroad. It's a story about riding a train that travels across the Milky Way and journeys through the world of constellations. Maybe the reason she knew the star Alberio is because of the story. And just like Hikari told Saya, Alberio is a famous star mentioned in the Night of the Galactic Railroad. "Your dad is a train conductor, right?" I had overheard someone mention that in a conversation before, too. They said he was an employee for the local line. That fact also explained why someone like Hikari, who didn't seem like a bookworm type, would really like something like Night on the Galactic Railroad. Hikari? Leaning against a handrail on the bridge, Hikari looked at the sky and the red hue from the setting sun and spread across it. I wondered if I had asked something I shouldn't have. Maybe I poked my nose too far into her personal business. As I started to worry that I had ruined the mood, Hikari answered me.
昨日望遠鏡で月を見たとき、何を感じた？
What do you mean?
月に大地があるって分かったとき、アキトはどう思った？
When we saw that there was land on the moon, what did I think I had seen that through that telescope? What did I feel? I was intrigued and very excited. And yet, seeing the landscape beyond the expanse of space, I couldn't help but remember a sadness that gripped my heart. What I really felt at the time.
私はね、行ってみたいって思った。
Huh?
ここじゃない。どこか遠くの世界。そこには山があって、谷があって、確かな大地があって、まるで別の世界がそこにあるように感じて、行ってみたいって思ったんだ。
Hikari stared longingly at the sky, though her gaze seemed to be fixated on something that lay far beyond the dusky sky. Though it was obscured by red veil, beyond there stretched the vastness of space, with countless stars that twinkled continuously. Seeing her profile, I felt as though Hikari was far from me, just like I was looking at the surface of the moon through that telescope. Even though I felt as if she was so close, she was still unfathomably far. Despite appearing to be within my grasp, I couldn't reach her no matter how far I stretched out my arms. Hikari.
どうしたの？
I had unknowingly taken her hand. Hikari looked at me in surprise. It's nothing. I could still feel the warmth from Hikari's hand after I had pulled away. I felt reassured by that fact.
こんなところにカップル発
At that moment, I heard the vulgar voice of the person I wanted to see least in the world.
見見たぞ、今手つないでただろ。イエーイ、光と空見はあっちっちあっちっち。
And there was Takichi and his lackeys spouting their nonsense. Pooch hid himself behind Hikari. He was such a shy dog that he'd hide if he was approached by anyone he wasn't used to.
またあんたたちか。ほんと暇だね。
お前らできてんだろ。
だったらどうだっていうの？
Without thinking, I said the exact same thing and at the exact same time as Takichi. Both Takichi and I were thrown for a loop by Hikari's audacious attitude.
私たち観測計画を立てなきゃいけなくって忙しいの。邪魔だからあっち行ってよ。
She waved her hand, gesturing as if she were shooing a fly. Hearing Hikari's non-pulsed tone, Takichi returned to his normal self.
俺は観測会なんて認めてねえからな。
だったらなんで終わりの回で言わなかったのよ。 生に嫌われたくないからでしょ。
違うっつうの。
Takichi backpedaled as he realized Hickory was a battle lost, then went after his new target, me.
いい気になるなよ、空見。お前が天の川のこと泣かしたの、俺たちは許してねえからな。
Not that I'm really wanting your forgiveness, though.
だと
The one who should forgive me is Saya herself. Takichi huffed, dissatisfied with my reply.
どうやって許してもらう気だ。土下座でもすんのか。
アルビレオを見せてあげればきっと分かってくれるよ。天体観測会はそのためのものだからね。
Yeah. I agreed wholeheartedly.
なんなんだそのあるなんとかって。さあ、
怪獣の名前だと思う。
知ってんだぞ。空見が昨日まで望遠鏡の使い方も知らなかったこと。だっせーな。毎日学校に持ってきて見せびらかしてたくせに。
And as usual, his two lackeys chimed in with echoes of so lame. It was so predictable that it made me wonder if they practiced this routine in their spare time. Acting mature, Hickory let out a purposefully loud sigh.
そんなのもう遠い過去の話だよ。タケ、こうしている間にも星は動いているんだよ。
急に難しいこと言うんじゃねえ。こないだ理科のテストで40点だったくせに。
あんたは38点だったでしょうが。
お前らなんかに絶対できね
できるよ。
え。できない
できる。そうだよね、アキト。
We can do it.
できなくって後で泣いて謝っても許してやんねえからな。
After that last remark, Takichi left for home with his 2 minions in tow.
ほんとタケにも困ったもんだよ。でも天体観測会は絶対に成功させなきゃいけないしね。
Hi. I replied as I recalled an image of Saya sitting in a corner across from the classroom, looking disinterestedly out the window. The reason she had cut herself off from the rest of the class is because of me. The day that she had transferred into the class, I made her cry in front of everyone. Because of that, I had created a very awkward situation between her and the rest of the class. I knew that if I could show Alberio to her, it would help clear up this misunderstanding. Although I wasn't sure if it would help me get along with her other classmates. Or get along with her other
大丈
classmates.
夫。きっとうまくいくよ。
Hi, you're right. Things have been going really well already. The reason I had involved the class was so that I could force Saya to come. Because even if Hickory or I had invited her out, there was no guarantee that she'd show up. Plus, stargazing can only happen at night, too. So we would need to get her parents' permission for her to come out. But with Sensei around, it became more of a supplementary lesson, and getting their permission was easy.
私たちもう望遠鏡の使い方も知ってるし余裕だって。
But I don't think that's all that matters. When you observe the stars, the weather has to be clear too. Even if you prepare everything perfectly, it won't matter if the sky is cloudy.
そっか。
Then there's the fact that the two of us don't really know how much about the stars yet. We could still have a few problems. Although we felt like experts on the subject just by borrowing a few books, the reality was that we had only looked at a mere 2 pages from a guidebook. So we need to prepare as much as we can, so we'll be ready for anything. We read through the books and we borrowed more studiously than we had ever studied in our homework. That night I got a phone call from Hickory.
大変だよアキト。白鳥座って夏の星座なんだって。
Really? If that was the case, then that meant that Alberio was, as part of the Cygnus constellation, would be a summer star too.
どうしよう。
What can we do? In an instant, it seemed like all our plans were derailed. In the end, it didn't matter that it was a summer constellation. Some constellations are described as belonging to different seasons, like winter constellation or summer constellation. However, that doesn't mean that you can't see them during the other seasons. It just means the best time to see those is during that particular time of the year. Most can be actually seen throughout the year. This fact is especially true with constellations close to the North Star. Those constellations tend to have long periods of visibility and can easily be seen for most of the year. Cygnus the Swan was one such constellation. Did you see the weather report?
見た見た、夜までずっと晴れだって。白鳥座は冬でも見られるし、天気予報もバッチリだし、これで勝ったも当然だね。
Hickory said this with an expression bright enough to rival today's sunny weather. Today was the day the stargazers meet up. We had already planned things out meticulously and had Sensei review it all for us. All that was left was waiting for the night to come.
いよいよ本番か。緊張するな。
In an attempt to ditch us, Saya had thrown on her backpack and was headed for the classroom door.
天の川さん。
Hickory? I interrupted Hickory as she called out to Saya and headed over to Saya myself.
何か用。
Promise you'll come tonight? I'd really like for you to see Alberio. Saya was at a loss for words and averted her eyes. She then outmaneuvered me and left the classroom in a hurry.
ねえ、天の川さんビビってたじゃん。ちゃんと来てくれるかな。
Hickory was mumbling to herself as we set up the telescope on the rooftop where we'd be observing from.
アキトってさ、ちょっとぶっきらぼうで女子からすると怖いんだよ。もっと爽やかスマイルしなよ。
What about you, Hickory? You also just say whatever you feel like without even thinking about what the other person feels. I interrupted you earlier so you wouldn't upset Saya. As I answered her in the exact blunt tone she just warned me about, I remembered the frightened expression on Saya's face and felt a twinge of guilt. I really wanted her to come, which is why I said something to her, but I think Hickory was right that it might have been had the opposite effect. After the telescope was set up, I pointed the lens at a faraway mountain and peered into the eyepiece. The image was blurry. I turned the dial to bring it into focus. The image became clear and appeared upside down from the eyepiece. And that was the reason I had always thought it was broken, but I was wrong. It was normal for a telescope to show an inverted or upside down image. The image flips upside down as it passes through the lens in the optical scopes used to see over the distances. Binoculars and spotting scopes use a prism to reorient the image. However, adding the prism takes away from the image quality. The instrument itself becomes heavier, and it inevitably costs more money. Which is why my telescope had an inverted image. And really, since there is no proper orientation in space, there's no need to correct the inverted image in an astronomical telescope. I set up the azimuth stand, setting the electrical tower at the center of the field of vision. There we go. Next, I looked down the small barrel affixed to the side of the telescope. This cylinder is called a finder, and it's very similar to the sights on a rifle. In telescopes with low magnification, the finder has crosshairs in the center. These crosshairs are used to find what you want to see, such as stars or any other celestial body. Needless to say, it's really difficult to find a tiny point of light quickly in the vast sky with the narrow field of view of a telescope. Which is why a finder comes in handy. You use its wide field of view to find your target first. Once you've found your target, then you align with the crosshairs in the center of the finder. If the finder and the telescope are both pointed at the same target, stars in the finder should also show up in the telescope's field of view. But in order to do that, we needed to make sure that the angle of the finder matched the direction of the telescope. Together, these preparatory steps make the optical lens alignment process. It can't really be done once it's dark, so we made sure to do it while it was still light outside. At that moment, I was attempting to align the optical lens between the finder and the telescope using the electrical tower as a landmark.
いたーピカリーン
One of the younger students came bounding up onto the rooftop. The girl's enthusiastic greeting was cut short by an emphatic judo chop to the head.
その名前で呼ぶんじゃない。
Seeing Hickory's hand still threateningly poised for another strike, the girl timidly corrected herself.
ピカリちゃん
I find it funny that we are just about 4 hours into this game already. Well, I think maybe even already over 4 hours into the game. And we're only just now meeting the last main heroine. Anyway, let's continue.
どうした5年生みんなで遊ぶって本当ちっ遊ぶんじゃないよ天体観測会をするんだ天体観測会
The little girl's expression turned serious once we affirmed her question.
ねえコロナも言っていいでしょね
The little girl pleaded as she clung to Hickory, tugging earnestly on her shirt.
私に言われてもな
I'm sure it'll be okay if we ask Sensei, right?
誰
Peeking out halfway behind Hickory and the little girl regarded me warily.
アキトだよ転校生のあ知ってるお兄ちゃんが言ってた転校生その1だ
What's with that nickname?
ちゃんと自己紹介しなできるでしょもう大きいんだから
Stilled by Hickory's prompting, the little girl faced me and set her posture.
日下部コロナ4年生です
Kusakabe? As in that Kusakabe?
さあ竹の妹なんだ
You don't say. For some reason, she looked like she was bracing herself for something. I'm Akita Sarami. I'm in the 5th grade. Nice to meet you, too, Corona. Remembering that Hickory had scolded me about how I came off as scary and blunt, I made a conscious effort to introduce myself with a little more sweetly.
紳士だお兄ちゃんと全然違う
She said as she looked at me with reverence in her eyes. Is she really Takechi's younger sister?
そうだよなんで
Just that they don't look alike at all. It's hard to believe a kid this cute could actually be his sister. Corona's ears perked up immediately after I'd said that she was cute.
コロナがかわいい
Is that weird?
よく言われるお兄ちゃんに全然似てないねって
Suka.
そうだよアッキー
Did she just call me Aki?
アッキーは遠くから来たんでしょどこから来たの東京ニューヨークほーらいきなり変なあだ名つけるなピカリンギブギブピカそうヒカリちゃんごめんなさい
Make sure you tell Sensei that you'd like to join us at the Stargazers meetup.
みはるちゃん私たちの先生をそんな風に呼ぶなお母さんまったく生意気なんだから
After Hickory let her go, Corona cried out. She said as she rubbed her temples like someone who was trying to ease a migraine. For some reason, it looked like they were having fun.
てかタケはいいって言ってるのお兄ちゃんには内緒にするダメって言うに決まってるもんまあじゃあタケはいいとしてちゃんと早乙女先生の許可をもらってから来るんだよ勝手に来たら追い返すからね分かった行ってくるありがとうアッキーピカリンその呼び方やめろ
She ran off the roof just as quickly as she had come. What an energetic kid. She kind of reminds me of you, Hickory.
どこ
I refrained from elaborating more since it seemed pretty unexpected to her. I didn't feel like being on the receiving end of one of her noogies. Why does she even want to come to our observation tonight? Does she even like stars?
が何やるか分かってないだけだよ。みんなでする遊びに混ぜてほしいんだと思う。4年生は数が少ないから。
There was only one class in each grade at this school. The fifth grade class that Hickory and I were in had 17 people, and we were the largest class in school. The classes got smaller the younger you went, but the fourth grade class, just 1 year below us, had only 4 kids. If the number of people keeps dropping, the school might be closed.
まあでもその前に亡くなっちゃうかも。
Why is that?
アキト知らないの？ダムのこと。
No, I haven't heard anything. What's this dam?
川にダムを作るかもって話。もうずっと前からあるんだけど。もしそうなったら、この辺り一帯は湖に沈んじゃうんだって。
Even the school? Hickory nodded solemnly. I didn't know. After being handed off to my granddad like unwanted baggage, it was no surprise that I wasn't aware of this town's situation. And with Granddad being the silent type, I doubt he would have told me much anyway. I took a good look around my surroundings from the rooftop. All this would be under a lake. There were paddies, fields, and overgrown empty lots scattered between sporadic trees. Nestled among them were the homes and other buildings. It was hard to imagine that everything here would be flooded and disappear beneath the lake created by the dam. Being as new to the town as I was, I couldn't scrape together any feeling of attachment to it. The town wasn't special to me, so it was hard to say I'd be sad to see it go, but I did think that losing the town would be a bit troublesome. I wondered how Hickory must feel. Thinking that, I glanced at her profile, but it was hard to tell from her expression whether she was unhappy or if she didn't care either way.
できた？
Yep, all done. That's the last of the prep work. With the axis of the lens set telescope setup was complete. We'd also checked the time of viewing coordinates and the time that Alberia would set. As long as the good weather held up, it seemed like tonight's observation would go off without a hitch.
それじゃあ帰ろっか。
Hi! Stargazing would take place at night, so we had decided that everyone should meet up again after going home to have dinner. Night had fallen. Everyone from the 5th grade class gathered in front of the school. Everyone was excited to be out there this late in the evening. Hickory had arrived. She was happily running over as she usually does, but right behind her was the puppy.
なになに？子犬？わあ、かわいい。
Despite being so happy to follow Hickory, Pooch suddenly became very timid when surrounded by so many unfamiliar faces.
どうかしたの？先生、ひかりちゃんが犬を連れてきちゃったんです。あらあら。
Miss Sayatomi seemed to be at a loss upon seeing the forlorn look on the puppy's face. I whispered to Hickory, "Why'd you bring him along?"
しょうがないじゃん。来る途中に様子を見に行ったらついてきちゃったんだもん。ひかりちゃんち、犬なんて飼ってたっけ？この子捨て犬で、今は橋の下で。
Having no choice, Hickory explained the circumstances surrounding her and Pooch to Miss Sayatomi and the others. During the course of her explanation, the reason my pants had been soaked on the first day I transferred in came to light as well. Everyone, including Sensei, looked at me approvingly.
いいでしょ、先生。今日だけ。困ったわね。
Sensei found it hard to be strict after seeing Hickory ask so eagerly, her hands clasped together. The fact that Hickory had told her just how she had saved him wasn't helping either.
今日だけよ。ありがとう、先生。あと、粗相は絶対にさせないこと。その時は掃除してもらいますからね。わかった、する。でも、どうするの？ ずっと橋の下に置いておくわけにはいかないでしょ。飼ってくれる人探してるんだけど、なかなかいないんだよね。そうだ、先生んちは犬飼ってるでしょ。うちはダメよ、もう太郎がいるし。とてそっか。
Hickory hung her head in disappointment. As it stood, Pooch would need some work, since he wasn't used to being pet by anyone and was extremely shy around strangers.
もう全員揃ったかしら。
I counted up everyone who gathered so far. Oh yeah, what about the 4th grade girl, Corona?
ねえタケ、コロナ来てないの？
母ちゃんにダメって言われて今頃押し入れでいじけてるぞ。
やっぱそうなるか。
What do you mean?
コロナのお母さん、コロナには異常に厳しいから。兄貴があんなだから妹に期待をかけてるみたい。
一言余計なんだよ。
Soka. I felt bad for her since it seemed like she had really wanted to come. I also really wanted her to see the stars.
あといないのは、そうだ、天の川さん。
Hickory exclaimed as she looked around the crowd. She's not here yet. I became a little worried as I noticed. I hope she didn't decide not to come because of my attitude when asking about her at lunch.
来るって言ってたよね。
Even though it seemed like the Stargazers meetup was an extracurricular lesson with Sensei here with us, attendance wasn't mandatory. The purpose of the meeting was also properly explained beforehand to the parents and guardians of the students, and Saya did say she'd attend.
待ってよ。
Finally fed up with being fussed about by the girls, Pooch ran off.
こら、どこ行くの？戻ってこーい。秋田、捕まえて。
I was closest to the direction in which he took off, so I chased after him. Wait! Getting lost around these parts at night could be a real pain. As I was frantically chasing him, Pooch suddenly stopped in his tracks. We unexpectedly ran into Saya, and Pooch had settled at her feet. Saya herself stood still, and for a moment it seemed like they were in their own little world, just one dog and one girl. Hiding behind Saya's legs, Pooch let out a frightened whimper.
どうしたの？
At first, Saya was confused by his behavior. Then she caught sight of me, the one who had been chasing him. She shot me a hateful glare. Hang on a minute, am I suddenly the bad guy now?
よしよし、もう大丈夫だよ。
Pooch's tail wagged furiously as Saya patted his head.
もうワン吉が懐いてる？美少女だからか？美少女だからなのか？
I seriously doubted the dogs had the same sense of beauty as people did, but it was clear that he had become quite fond of Saya.
おい、さっさと始めろよ。
Takichi asked in an irritated voice.
早く終わらせて帰りてえよ。
文句言うなら来なきゃよかったじゃん。
お前らがちゃんとできるかどうか見届けてやるためだよ。できなかったら全力で笑ってやっからな。
ふんだ、そんなことにはなりませんよーだ。
お前、何笑ってんだ？
うん、なんでもない。
Takichi wasn't the only one who was getting tired of waiting around. I took account of everyone. Looks like everyone's here. Hickory turned around to pick up Pooch, but... He was nestled comfortably in Saya's arms, enjoying the attention. Several of the boys glared at the puppy enviously.
ちょっと懐きすぎじゃないか？
Guess dogs like cute girls too, huh? She buried her fist in my side.
まあいっか。おかげでお姫様もご機嫌みたいだし。
Though I was hunched over in pain grasping my side, I couldn't help but agree with her. I'm pretty sure that was the first time I'd seen Saya in such a good mood.
それじゃあ屋上行くよ。
With Hikari in the lead, all of us made our way back up to the roof. When we got to the roof, the winter stars were twinkling brightly in the clear night sky.
星が綺麗に見えるよ。
Hickory exclaimed happily. There wasn't a single cloud in the sky, and even the night sky felt bright. Where's Cygnus?
あそこ
Sure enough, low in the northwestern sky, I could see the unfurled wings of the swan. Since it's a summer constellation, I figured it would only stay visible for another hour and a half before setting. Following the lines of the head and neck toward the horizon, there at the tip of its beak was Albiero. At first glance, it looked just like any normal single star, but in reality it was a double star, made up of two stars aligned together tightly.
沈んじゃう前に早く見よう
As we stood there, it seemed like the swan would dive below the horizon at any minute. Despite knowing that we had plenty of time to spare, I felt like we needed to hurry. I went to grab the telescope we prepared and left here in the afternoon. What the?
どうしたの
It's not here! Hickory cocked her head to one side in confusion. In shock, I reiterated, My telescope, it's not here! I had left my telescope near the entrance to the roof with the optical lens already set up for tonight, but I couldn't find it anywhere.
帰るときここに置いてたよね
Yeah!
どうしたのああ先生ここに置いてた望遠鏡がなくなってるのなんですって誰かが片付けちゃったのかな他の先生にも今夜の観測会のことは伝えてあるから知らずに触るってことはないと思うんだけど本当にここに置いていたの
Yes. If it had been put back in the case, all the effort I'd gone through setting up the optical lens would have been for nothing. I thought it would be okay to leave it here since most of the students have already gone home for school and hardly anyone comes up here.
一度職員室を見てくるわねあなたたちはこの辺りを探してみて
Okay, thanks, Miss Sayatomi. I was careless. It's not like it was guaranteed that no one would come up here. I split up from Hickory and scoured the nearby area once again. But I found nothing. How could that be? It's not like it would be easy to hide something that big. I heard Hickory yell.
あったよアキト足だけ
The tripod and stand had been folded up and laid on the ground in an obscure corner. But still, the all-important telescope was nowhere to be found. Someone had deliberately taken only the telescope.
やっぱり誰かが持ってっちゃったんだどうしたのひかりちゃん始めないのそれが
We can't find the telescope anywhere. Hearing the bitterness in my tone, a wave of unease spread amongst my classmates that had gathered around. Saya, who had been standing apart from the group holding Pooch, also noticed a change in the mood and glanced over.
んどうしたんだなんか望遠鏡がなくなったって言ってるはあなんだそれあんなでかいものどうやったらなくすんだよさっきから何笑ってんだよお前
タケまさかあんたの仕業じゃないでしょうね
ああなんでもかんでも俺のせいにしてんじゃねえよ
こないだも絡んできてたじゃん天体観測なんかできっこないとか言って
そうだっけ
Takichi recorded in his exasperated tone. It looked like he was trying to play it off, but I felt like he really didn't know anything about my telescope. There's no proof that he did it. He really might not know either.
でも
なあもう帰っていいか望遠鏡ないんだったら観測会なんかできねえだろ寒いよ
Hearing Takichi's complaint, a few other classmates began murmuring in agreement. Although some of them had been looking forward to tonight's observation, not everyone was. A lot of them had come just because it was something that we had decided to do as a class, and Sensei had approved it. I tried quietly to make my way off the roof.
アキト
I'm going to look for it.
私も行く
お前らどこ行くんだよ
探しに行くの望遠鏡を
じゃあ俺帰ろっと
なんでよ探してくるって言ってるじゃない待ってなさいよ
だって寒いし
I'm sure Takichi's complaint spoke for the rest of our classmates who weren't all that enthusiastic about tonight. I spoke to Hickory. I'm sure everyone will leave if both of us go to look for it.
そうかも
You should stay here, Hickory. I know everyone will stay and listen if it's you. I doubted anyone would stick around for a poorly adjusted transfer student like me.
わかった。
Hickory reluctantly agreed with me. Albiero will set around 9:30 p.m., so I'll be back before then. I had a little over an hour to search. Takechi smirked as he overheard me.
もし空見が間に合わなかったらどうするんだ？
その時は裸で寒中水泳でも何でもやってやるわよ。
面白そうじゃねえか。約束だぞ。
Hickory!
言っちゃった。アキト、見つけてきて。望遠鏡は学校の中にあるはずだから。
Gotcha, I'll definitely find it. I reassured Hickory and glanced over to Saya. Though Saya was regarding me with an anxious expression, she averted her eyes in embarrassment when our eyes met. I'll be back. I left the roof in a rush. First, I scoured every inch of the school building. The classrooms were locked up and no one could get into them. If my telescope were somewhere in the school, then it would have to be in the hallways or even in the boys' restroom. I searched every room I could enter, but I still couldn't find my telescope.
空見くん？
Oh, Sensei, my telescope, did you? Sensei shook her head.
職員室にもなかったわ。
Oh, okay. Which meant that Takechi and his lackeys had probably hidden it. I will keep looking for it, so if it's okay, could you just ask everyone to wait up a bit more?
ええ、それはいいけど。
Sensei glanced at the clock. I will definitely be back before Albiero sets. I reassured her as I took off running. I searched every place in the school I could get into, but I still couldn't find my telescope. I went out into the schoolyard and looked in the physical education storage shed. This is where Takechi had hidden my indoor shoes before. Nope. Ugh, not here. I looked up in the sky. The positions of the stars were slightly different from before. Even though it happened slowly, the heavens were really revolving. I had wasted a lot of time. If I didn't find the telescope and return to the rooftop soon, I wouldn't be able to show Saya the twin stars of Albiero. I wasn't sure I would get another chance. In order for the students to stay this late for activities, the teacher had to get approval from the students' parents. If tonight's stargazing ended in failure, and we did try it again, I was sure that less than half of the students would show up. And I wasn't certain that we'd be able to get Sensei's help either. Riled up with my impatience and anger, I tried to cool my head with the crisp night air. It was as if Takechi who'd hit it, then he wouldn't do something like throw it away. When he'd taken my indoor shoes, they were still clean when I found them. I was pretty sure he wouldn't do anything like deface or break something as expensive as his telescope either. That's why I thought for sure I'd find it somewhere at the school, but it seemed like I'd been wrong. Judging from the behavior earlier, it was likely that he had nothing to do with the situation too. If that was the case, there would be no point in looking in places Takechi would likely hide it. The school grounds were extensive. With it being dark as well, it would be very easy to overlook the telescope. Still, I psyched myself up and continued my search for it.
おい、大ごとになってるじゃないか。どうすんだよ。
だってたけちゃんが喜ぶと思ったから。
おい、どうしたんだ？あ、たけちゃん、こいつ。おい、自分で言えよ。
実はね、たけちゃん、俺
なんだって？
ごめん、たけちゃん。空見を困らせたらたけちゃんが喜ぶと思って。
先生に言いつけられたら絶対に怒られるぞ。もし壊したりしてたら弁償だ。
どうしよう、たけちゃん。
心配すんな。俺がやったことにしてやるから。でもそれじゃ犯人はこいつで俺じゃないって言ったところで今さら誰も信じねえだろ。それに実際俺がやらせたようなもんじゃねえか。
たけち
あんたたち、さっきから何こそこそ話してるの？
別にこそこそなんかしてねえよ。ああ、楽しみだな。光の寒中水泳。
もしアキトが間に合ったらあんたにやってもらうからね。
へっ、いいぜ、やってやら。
泳げないくせによっぽど隠し場所に自信があるんだ。一つ言っとくけど、
なんだよ。
望遠鏡を隠したことはすっごい腹立つけど、いいけど、もし傷つけたり壊したりしてたらただじゃ済まさないからね。
空見のことになるとムキになりやがって。やっぱお前らできてんだろ。できてんだろ。
そんなんじゃない。あの天体望遠鏡はね、アキトのお父さんの形見なんだよ。あれをなくしちゃったらアキトにはもう何も残ってないんだ。お父さんやお母さんと一緒に過ごした頃の思い出が全部なくなっちゃうんだ。
なんだよそれ。知らねえよそんなの。
There was a limit to how long a single person could last searching the entire grounds of a large school. I checked every possible place as if it would hide something as long and narrow as my telescope, the bushes, the physical education storehouse, but it was nowhere to be found. There was a possibility that it would have been in a locked classroom. Since Takichi's gang most likely hid the telescope after school, it was an entirely believable scenario. But if that's the case, I won't be able to get in until morning. No, wait. Wouldn't it be better to ask Sensei if she can unlock the doors for me? Or better yet, shouldn't I just tell Sensei everything? I'm sure she'd be fine to tell her about everything that just happened. But that was the last thing I wanted to do. I felt like I'd been playing right into their harassment. And I had no proof either. There was still a chance someone else had done this too. Overwhelmed by impatience, I looked up at the sky. Only 30 minutes remained until every arrow would set. I heard a puppy bark. A small shadow came running from the distance. Pooch? Pooch was scampering around at my feet. Saya had been following after Pooch. Saya? As I unexpectedly came out of the shadows, Saya let out a shriek as if she'd seen a ghost. Seemingly embarrassed by her outburst, she clamped her mouth shut, with both her hands, her cheeks turning pink. What is it? Jeez, get out of here. I'm a little busy right now. Saya called Pooch back to her, keeping her distance from me as if she were afraid. After weighing his options between me and Saya, Pooch took off in a completely different direction from either of us. Saya ran after him. I had no intention of being distracted by Pooch, so I decided to leave him to Saya. I guess it's not around here. I'll tell Sensei and ask her to open the classroom for me. What's with the noise? Saya had stopped in her tracks and was looking at something. She turned toward me and looked as if she wanted to tell me something. What's the matter? Reluctantly, I headed to where she stood. Saya and Pooch were standing at the roots of a really large tree. She mumbled at me as she pointed upwards. Ah! There, caught in the branches, was something white and cylindrical. My telescope! I owe you one, Pooch. Thank you, Saya. She took a step back from me as she muttered, I need to find a way up. As I looked around, Saya silently took off running somewhere. She came back after a bit with an empty plastic bucket. Arigato. I hurriedly slipped onto the bucket and reached up, but it was still too far beyond my grasp. And so I started climbing up the tree trunk. I'll be fine. I'm really good at climbing trees. I told her confidently as I scaled higher toward my goal.
もう少しだけ辛抱しましょうね。はーい。じゃあもうちょっとだけ。
空見のやつ戻ってくるかな。
さあな。でももし間に合ったらタケちゃんが寒中水泳しなきゃいけなくなるぞ。
そんなのダメだよ。
紅茶うめえ。何してんだ？お前らももらってこいよ。
ああ、うん。
Once I retrieved the telescope, I ran back up to the roof. After that, Pooch and Saya followed behind. Just a bit more, come on.
あ、来た。本当に戻ってきやがった。
Takichi's minions were waiting right at the top of the stairs at
こ
the
こは
roof.
通さないぞ。
ぞ。
I stopped to catch my breath.
やだね。
Move it!
どいたらタケちゃんが寒中水泳しなきゃいけなくなるからダメだ。
Seemed like they wouldn't be letting me through the roof no matter how long I waited. Just to let you guys know, I won't hold back.
お前なんか怖くないぞ。
そうだぞ。
Even if it was 2 against 1, I didn't plan on backing down. But I had the telescope too. I wouldn't be able to go all out while holding this. Moreover, if I did act and somebody got injured, that would be the end of any more stargazing meetups. Sensei would probably get in trouble too. The minions picked up on this weakness and became more
あいつの望遠
confident.
鏡を取り上げろ。
Stop! Let go!
俺が抑えてるからその間に行け。
You jerks! Well, I guess it was time to go all out. Besides, they were the ones in the wrong. Surely the grown-ups would understand. I had to protect the telescope at all costs. It was my last piece of my memories. Just then, a voice that could pierce through your eardrums echoed through the corridor. Takichi's minions and I stopped moving and covered our ears.
その天体望遠鏡は空見くんの大切なお父さんの。だから
Slowly, tears gathered in Saya's eyes. Was she going to cry? Me and the other 2 guys thought so. But Saya held back in her tears. I was moved to tears myself. Those jewel-like blue and orange eyes kept their steady gaze on Takichi's lackeys, leaving them motionless.
俺たち別になあ。
タケちゃんのために。
Saya gathered all of her strength and stared them down. Pooch came like reinforcements and began to bark. The minions looked away as they backed up and then let me through. Thanks, Saya. I held out my hand to Saya. Come on, let's go. She took my hand timidly, and together we ran up to the stairs to the roof.
あ
After getting back to the roof, Hickory and I wasted no time in chit-chat and quickly set up the telescope and tripod. After a bit of difficulty, we got it mounted and turned the lens toward the northwest sky. Where's Cygnus? However, I found Cygnus, but I couldn't find its key feature, the beak. Where's Albiero? Hikari said apologetically. I checked my watch. No way, I thought we'd still had some time before it set. Based on my calculations earlier, we should have made it in time. Why can't we see it? But without an explanation from anyone, I soon realized there was a mountain in the northwestern corner. Since Mikuzaki Village was in a valley, you couldn't see the horizon, not even from the school's roof. Since that time I had calculated earlier was only for the horizon, if there was anything to block the view of the horizon, Albiero would be hidden from view. Cygnus' beak had already flown into the far edge of the night. I can't believe it. I fell to my knees, stunned.
もう見れないの？せっかく待ってたのに。
I heard everyone sigh in their voices in disappointment.
やっぱ嘘つきじゃねえか。待ってて損したぜ。
Even Takichi, who should have sounded more triumphant, spoke with guilt in his voice. After we had worked so hard, after all the preparations Hickory and I went through, even tracking down the telescope, we had been so very close.
間に合わなかったの。
Saya posed her question very quietly. Sorry, I answered weakly. I had promised to show her.
もっと高いところないかな。そこからならまだ見えるはずだよ。
It's impossible. It'll already have set by the time we get there. If we were to search for the top of the mountain blocking El Barrio, we'd probably see it. But by the time we got to the summit, it would have sunk far below the horizon. I stood and faced the other students with my head bowed. We won't be able to see El Barrio. I'm sorry to have wasted your time. I could show them the stars in the sky now, or the ones that would be rising soon, but I wouldn't be able to bring back a star that had moved on. Perhaps another day. I said in an attempt to salvage the situation, but I could feel my eyes burning. I knew it was surely impossible now. No one would show after a disaster like this. I thought bitterly to hold back my tears. It was so frustrating to have these days of preparation and anticipation all come to nothing, just when those bitter tears had begun to fall.
冬のアルビレオならどうかしら。
I lifted my head after Sensei, who had been quietly watching the scene unfold, finally
冬
spoke.
のアルビレオ？
What the heck was that? Our teacher looked at everyone
夏
before
の
nodding
星
once.
座である白鳥座が沈むのと入れ替わるように登ってくる星座があるわ。
The teacher gazed at the sky in the opposite direction of the west-northwest area we were all facing. There sat at the entrance of the valley a V-shaped crevice that opened all the way through the horizon. From this crevice, a bright first-magnitude star could be seen starting its journey toward the heavens, although it was very close to the horizon. It was the brightest star in the sky, Sirius. Other stars come together with Sirius to create the constellation.
冬の星座、大犬座よ。
Canis Major? But I'd never heard of such a star in the Canis Major. It certainly wasn't in the textbook. Sensei, what's the Winter El Barrio?
ほうき星さん、いらっしゃい。
The teacher called us over to the southeast edge of the roof.
この辺りがいいわ。望遠鏡をここに。
I set up the telescope according to the directions I'd been given.
ほうき星さんと、そうね。天の川さん。
Saya jumped at having her name
温
called
かい
suddenly.
紅茶をもう一杯入れてきましょうか。はい。みんな、あと少しだけ待ってもらっていいかしら。冬の夜空で先生が一番好きな星をみんなに見せてあげたいの。
The attitude of the cold and disinterested students who were on the verge of heading home changed a bit after hearing
先
Sensei's
生が
words.
一番好きな星なんだって。見てみたいね。星が昇ってくるまでもうしばらくかかるから校舎の中で待ちましょう。
I'll stay here, Sensei. If there is any more preparations to be made, I wanted to get
焦
them
ることは
done.
ないわ。寒かったでしょう。一緒に温まりましょう。
Following the teacher's instructions, everyone headed inside the school and had some of the hot tea that had been prepared by Hickory and Saya. And as we all waited to warm up, Sensei talked about the stars. We listened to the adventures of the hero Perseus and the romantic tale of Andromeda. We also heard the tales of Hunter Orion and his hound, and other interesting myths and legends related to the constellations. Even though it's not a constellation, we also talked about the story Night on the Galactic Railroad. That's when Hickory surprised everyone by reciting a verse from the story. Thanks to them, we were able to pass the time and everyone forgot about being bored.
そろそろいい頃だわ。
Sensei said after she checked her watch. Then she took us back to the roof and led us toward the starry sky. When we reached the roof, students looked up at the night sky with as much more excitement than they previously had.
さっき話した星座はどこにあるでしょうか。
They all tried their hardest to find stars and name the constellations.
あれじゃないかな。ほら、あの星と、あっちと、全然わかんないよ、先生。
Perhaps this was the expected behavior because Sensei just
じゃあ
laughed a little.
これから冬の星の目印をみんなに教えるわ。冬の大三角を覚えているかしら。授業で習ったはずなんだけど。
There were a few raised hands throughout the students, but for the most part, everyone didn't seem too confident. Maybe some of us could remember what we had learned in class. However, I don't think many of us had a chance to actually look up at the stars in the sky
オリオン
yet.
座がどれかわかる人いる？
One of Takichi's minions quickly raised his hand.
水原くん。あれ？
He just pointed in the general direction of the southeastern sky, but the teacher nodded anyway.
ちぇ、私だって知ってるのに。
Hickory said that Takichi's lackey regretfully, and she had hesitated to raise her own hand.
オリオン座はすべての星座の中で最も形が整っている星座と言われているわ。それに明るい星が多いから比較的見つけやすい星座でもあるの。だからオリオン座を目印にして覚えましょうか。
Everyone gazed
オ
up
リ
at
オン
Orion's
座の左
constellation.
肩の赤い星、あれはベテルギウスという星よ。ベテルギウスは不思議な星で5年半くらいの周期で明るくなったり少し暗くなったりするの。お月様みたいに欠けたりするから。いい答えね。でも違うわ。ソラミくん、わかるかしら？
Because it's getting larger and smaller? The teacher smiled sweetly and nodded her
あ
head.
るよ。どういうこと？あの星、大きさが変わるの？ベテルギウスが大きく膨らんだり小さく縮んだりしているの。そのせいで地球からは明るくなったり暗くなったりしているように見えるのよ。
The students all exclaimed in
それだけじゃ
admiration.
ないわ。あの星は実はもう爆発してなくなってるっていう研究者もいるのよ。嘘だ。だってあるじゃん、あそこに。
The teacher just smiled as if she had been expecting that reaction.
地球からベテルギウスまでの距離はおよそ642光年。じゃあ今私たちが見ているあのベテルギウスはいつの姿なのかしら。どういうこと？わかんない。今の姿じゃないの？ 642
The teacher smiles brightly at Saya, who had answered in a tiny, weak voice.
1光年は光の速さで進んで1年かかる距離だから642光年先にある星の光が地球に届くまでおよそ642年かかることになるの。
And so, light from a star 642 light years away will take 642 years to reach the Earth.
だからあれはうんと昔のベテルギウスなんだ。ベテルギウスだけじゃないわ。太陽系より外の星々はどれもうんと遠くにある。地球に光が届くまでに何年もかかるから私たちがこうして見られる星の姿はみんなうんと昔の姿なのよ。
All of the students nodded their heads as they listened, though probably no one actually understood.
ということは？
That maybe Beetlejuice has already vanished? The teacher nodded. That Beetlejuice that we all see is actually how the star looked 642 years ago. If we wanted to see what Beetlejuice looks like right now, we'd still need to wait 642 years. And during that time, if the star were to go supernova and be destroyed, we wouldn't even know until well into the future.
ベテルギウスがいつ夜空から消えてしまうかわからない。今日か明日か来月か来年か、もっとずっと未来か。
Everyone watched Alpha Ori and the Orion constellation Betelgeuse with serious expressions. It may even be exploding right now. My heart began to pound at the possibility.
ベテルギウスが消滅するとき、その最後の光が地球に届くと、あの星が昼間でも見えるくらい明るく光り輝くって言われてるの。
So bright that you would even be able to see the star in the middle of the day?
もしかしたらその光をあなたたちはその目で見る日が来るかもしれないわね。
すっげー。
おー。でもそしたらベテルギウスなくなっちゃうんでしょ。やだな、そんなの。
The boys looked forward to the star's destruction while the girls mourned its loss. I stopped to consider each experience and looked up at the expected old stars.
ベテルギウスから今だと左斜め下へ行ったところにもう一つ明るい星が見えるかしら。
Everyone tried their best to find it.
あった、あれだ。
違うよ、遠すぎるだろ。こっちだよ。みんな見つかったかしら。
A guess could be heard here and there from the students.
あの星はプロキオン、子犬座の星よ。
Everyone laughed gleefully at the appropriate timing of Poochie's bark.
そしてその2つの間を下へ降りていったところにとっても明るい星があるわね。
It was a star that was so bright you didn't need to search for it.
あれがシリウス。すべての星の中で一番明るい星よ。
With an apparent visual magnitude of close to -1.5, it's the brightest star in the heavens. Aside from our sun, Jupiter, Mars, and the other bodies in our solar system, it's the brightest star in the night sky.
その3つの星を結んで冬の大三角というのよ。 この明るい3つの星が冬の星空の目印になるの。そのシリウスがあるのが大犬座、子犬座と大犬座とオリオン座。何か思い出さない？
さっき話してたやつだ。
The teacher nodded with an expression that said, "Very well done."
大犬座と子犬座は狩人オリオンの猟犬だって言われているの。
The students all exclaimed in admiration again. I finally realized that Sensei had told us stories about the legend of Orion so that we would be interested in the Winter Triangle.
これから見る冬のアルビレオはあの大犬座のすぐ近くにあるの。空見くん、望遠鏡の準備はいいかしら。
Hi. I'm not sure why I answered so nervously.
経緯台で見つけるにはちょっとコツがいるのよ。いい？まずは大犬座の後ろ足から。
Sensei guided the hand that I had on the Atsumasumoth mount and tilted the telescope. Blah, blah, blah. She placed her cheek right next to mine, and we took turns peeking through the telescope.
そこから2つの星を結んだのと同じ距離を延長したところに
Equal to the distance between two stars. Sensei peeked through the telescope.
ほら、あったわ。
The teacher stopped the small handle of the Altizimuth mount.
どうしたの？空見くん。
The teacher looked at me curiously. We had finally found the star, but I wasn't moving to look through the telescope. Well, I want Saya to look first. After saying that, I stepped aside.
おいでよ。遠慮しないでさ。
Hickory pulled the bashful Saya forward. With everyone looking on, Saya became nervous.
私からでいいの？
Yeah, we made a promise after all.
ハートがつっかえてんだから早く早く。
Urged forward by Hickory, Saya bent over the telescope. She very timidly looked through the lens of the telescope. Her long hair cascaded forward.
どう？何か見える？どうなの？ねえってば。
After Hickory voiced her impatience, Saya murmured a few words.
これがアルビレオ。冬のアルビレオ。そう呼ばれている星よ。きれい。
Saya stood for a long moment in complete silence, holding her breath as she continued looking through the telescope. Everyone else had held back their own breaths and watched her as they watched over her.
あ、そんなに綺麗なの？私も早く見たいよ。
After a short while more, Saya gathered some of her fallen hair behind one ear and pulled away from the telescope with a small, soft sigh.
次私。あ、ずるいひかりちゃん。
Hickory impatiently dove toward the telescope.
本当だ。アルビレオによく似てる。
After careful observation, Hickory turned to me and grinned.
アキト、綺麗だよすごく。
Afterward, the students lined up and one by one looked through the telescope. Halfway through the line, Sensei realigned the Altusmuth mouth to match the star's new position in the sky that had changed with time. Everyone had their chance to look through the telescope.
アキトも見なよ。
Sure. After taking a deep breath, I slowly leaned over the telescope. So much had happened up to this point that my chest felt like it would burst. And now the star shown at the end of the telescope was a star I didn't even know. I was a bit scared to even look. Many stars could be seen in the midst of all that above that round viewfinder. Right in the middle were two stars cuddled close together just like a set of twins. So this is the Winter Albiero, a double star system made up of a clear blue star and a bright orange star. They were quite simple to look at, but beautiful stars nonetheless, especially because the light from the two stars beautifully resembles Saya's eyes.
大犬座145番星。通称冬のアルビレオ。白鳥座のアルビレオと違ってそれほど知られていない星なの。だけど先生はこの星が好きだわ。つつましく、それでいてまっすぐに感じるもの。冬の星空で一番好きな星よ。
Sensei faced the students and Saya as she spoke those words. In spite of her flushed expression, Saya gazed idly at the teacher as all of the students looked at her eyes enviously.
天の川さんの目ってあの星みたいで綺麗だね。いいなあ。
As she noticed everyone watching her, Saya awkwardly hung her head and turned away. I just continued gazing through the telescope as the exchange went on next to me. To the naked eye, the Winter Albiero was so dark that it only looked like a tiny dot. But when I viewed through the telescope, its prominent colors became much clearer. Suddenly, my father's words rang through my ears. Don't fear the darkness, because though the night is dark, the stars shine dazzlingly bright. After all the good and bad times, irritation and frustration, after giving up on it all, everything in front of me became dark. But to think that the star I saw before me was this bright. The reason that I can feel the strength of a star's light is all thanks to the darkness. Stars are really beautiful, huh? The words tumbled from my mouth as I recalled the time when my father and I had gazed up at Albiero. It felt just like this. That forgotten, idyllic memory filled my empty chest with such warmth.
でもそれ本物のあれなんとかじゃないんだろ。
もう何が言いたいのさ。
だったらタケちゃんの勝ちってことじゃ。
そうだよな。だからタケちゃんは賭けに負けてなんてないよな。
はい？あんたら今見たでしょうに。綺麗だったでしょ、冬のアルビレオ。
そうなんだけど。でもお前らやめとけ。
タケちゃん、
俺の負けだ。じゃないと俺の格好がつかないだろうが。
It's fine, we lost this time.
何言い出すのさ、アキト。
It's fine, I'll take care of the penalty game. I said, feeling completely at ease as I looked at Hickory and Takechi, astonished expressions.
罰ゲーム？なんでもないの先生、こっちのことだから。ほら、アキトもバカなこと言わないでさ。
そうだぜ空見、かっこつけてんじゃねえよ。
I ignored Hickory and the fussy winner Takechi and called out to the other students. Everyone's already had a look, right? I'm going to put away the telescope now.
そうね。もう遅いし、今日はおしまいにしましょうか。
As the teacher spoke, everyone seemed to immediately recall the cold and left the rooftop one after another.
空見のやつ、何考えてんだ。
どうせ口だけだよ。
そうだ、できっこないって。
Takeichi and his lackeys voiced their suspicion of my words and they entered the school.
アキト、片付け手伝うよ。
Saya seemed like she wanted to say something, but once Hickory showed up, she ran away.
どうしたの？
No, nothing in particular. I knew she had wanted to say something, but after seeing the twin stars, I couldn't focus on anything else.
本気でやる気じゃないよね。罰ゲーム。
We'll see. As I tried to avoid the question, Hickory grumbled as she looked at me incredulously before breaking into a big smile.
やったね。大成功じゃん。
A huge success, huh?
だってみんな綺麗って言ってくれたじゃん。天の川さんも感動してくれたみたいだったし。終わりよければ全てよしってね。
Yeah, that's true. And with that, we had overcome many obstacles to end our first Stargazers meetup in peace. We didn't have school the next day, and I kept my promise and went through with the penalty game. After swimming to the opposite side of the river and back, Takeichi seemed to be at a loss for words.
すげえ寒そう。
アキト、大丈夫なの？
Hi, I'm fine. I tried my best to look unconcerned as my teeth chattered and Hickory ran up to me. My lips were probably blue.
早く体拭いて。
I took the towel from Hickory and began drying off. But with only my upper body naked and my pants still on, drying off would be impossible. So I did it. I looked at them with an expression that dared Takeichi and his lackeys to complain. I felt a little better as I looked at the speechless Takeichi and his gang of
無
goons.
茶しすぎだよ、バカバカ。
Come in aside. After apologizing to Hickory, I took my shirt and jacket and had planned to go out in style with my jacket laid across my shoulders. And that's when...
あなたたち、何をやっているの？
Uh-oh.
やべ、先生だ。
Then the sensei appeared seemingly well aware of the situation and quite angry. And next to her, there was Saya. It was apparent that she had already spoken with Sensei.
本当にあなたたちはいつも問題ばかり。
Come in, Asai.
ごめんなさい。
お説教は後よ。空見くん、いらっしゃい。
Holding back her anger for now, Sensei grabbed my hand and began walking. I was really impressed with how well she kept her anger in check. Sensei took me to her house and threw me into a bath, already filled with hot water.
しっかり温まってくるのよ。100数えるまで出てはダメですからね。
As I began to feel the warmth take over my frozen body in the bath, I murmured to myself, at least it's all over now. The past few days were really a lot of fun. I had looked up a lot of information on stars while working together with Hickory on this stargazing meetup. Celestial objects in the cosmos, it was all such a different world from the one I'd known until now. Learning about the mechanisms of the vastness of space was a lot of fun. I studied telescopes and was happy that I was slowly learning how to use them too. More than anything, looking through the lens at real stars was the most exciting. I had done everything together with Hickory. It was just so much fun to nurture a new fascination with someone else. I was happy that I had been able to share that enjoyment together with someone. But now it was over. Like me, Hickory was really popular in her class and had a lot of friends. She even said that she was the type to get bored easily. You could tell that just by looking at her. I was sure that the Knight of the Galactic Railroad girl was satisfied now that she'd seen Winter Elbialer.
月に大地があるって分かった時、アキトはどう思った？私はね、行ってみたいって思った。ここじゃない、どこか遠くの世界。そこには山があって、谷があって、確かな大地があって、まるで別の世界がそこにあるように感じて、行ってみたいって思ったんだ。
Somewhere far from here? Where would I want to go? Up until now, I didn't want to go anywhere. After losing my parents, I didn't enjoy anything. I had always thought nothing would ever be fun again, so to feel enjoyment again, I was just so lonely because I knew I could never get back what I had been lost. Sorry for making you worry so much. I had my hair dried thoroughly with a dryer and was even lent some clothes, after which I was given a scolding that was even more thorough than the hair drying. When I was finally released, it was already dusk.
Akito!
Hickory! Hickory was in front of the small candy store. You waited for me?
だって私の代わりに罰ゲームやってくれたんじゃん。
Well, I said I would. Besides, I was the only one who didn't make it in time. That's how I answered, but that wasn't how I felt. Simply put, all our fun times would soon be over, and I was bitter. I was in despair. On top of that, she watched me get bullied by Takichi and the others. Though just remembering their faces after I got out of the river filled me with intense satisfaction. Hickory watched as a silly, pseudo-angry expression.
またぶっきらぼうしてる。そんなんじゃお姫様に怖がられちゃうよ。
Huh?
よしよし、いい子だね。
Saya and Pooch?
ワン吉じゃもうないんだよ。ねえ、天の川さん。
Saya nodded her head.
小太郎ちゃん。
Kotoru? Pooch, well, Kotoru answered happily.
太郎の子供だから小太郎。
Brr.
Taro, laying in front of the kennel, answered reluctantly. So you guys decided to give him to Sensei?
うん。最初ダメって言ってたんだけど、太郎が小太郎を気に入っちゃったみたいで、小太郎を連れてこうとしたら小屋の中にかくまって出てこなくなっちゃったの。小太郎ちゃんも太郎ちゃんに懐いてるみたい。
Tiny Kotoru frolicked around Big Taro, and he looked a bit
だ
annoyed.
から厳密に言うと先生じゃなく太郎が引き取ってくれたってわけ。
Ah well, I'm glad he's found a place to live. I felt relieved, but also a little lonely. The Stargazer's meetup was over, and now the stray dog had found a home. Another link between Hickory and I was gone. Worrying over it wouldn't help anyone, though. As I got ready to leave, Saya, who had been busy petting Ketsuru's head, suddenly stood up.
私、空見くんに謝らないといけない。自己紹介の時、急に泣き出したりして、ごめんなさい。
You don't need to apologize. I'm the one that hurt your feelings.
違うの。私が勘違いしてて。
It's fine. I was the one that created the misunderstanding anyway.
アキト。
Hickory poked me in the side. It actually hurt a bit. What is it?
黙って天の川さんの話を聞け。
Hi. I stopped talking. And when I did, Saya, with a nervous expression and all, began to open up little by little.
前の学校にいた時、私、この目のせいでずっとからかわれたり、いじめられたりしたの。自分でも嫌で。だってみんなと違うから。だから隠したくて。
Is that why you were wearing sunglasses? So it had nothing to do with the inner city high fashion.
でも先生が外しなさいって言うから仕方なく外したら。 そしたら
Your eyes look like El Viero.
怪獣みたいだって言われたんだと思ったの。
It wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. It must be really frustrating to have someone you're meeting for the first time mention the eye colors you've had a complex about your whole life. And in front of a large group of people, too.
ごめんなさい。
No, I'm sorry, too. The misunderstanding wasn't Saya's responsibility. Besides, most people don't know the names of stars. I was the one in the wrong for saying something so careless.
でも違うって分かった。昨日怪獣なんかじゃなかった。綺麗だった。冬のアルビレオ。
Sayo struggled to get the words out.
私の瞳に似てた。
In the tiniest voice, the words "just a little" were added to the end of the sentence, and she hung her head and blushed.
ありがとう、空見くん。私の目を見て、あんな綺麗なものを最初に思い浮かべてくれて。嬉しかった。すごくすごく。
Saya said, finally working through her shyness. Her eyes were glued to the floor. But with that smile, my head began to spin and I stumbled a bit. Even Hickory, who was standing next to me. I'm not sure why, but she stumbled a bit too.
それが言いたかったの。だから、それじゃ。
She vigorously bowed her head. And before we knew it, she was gone.
何あれ。超可愛いんですけど。
Hickory said with an expression of utter disbelief as she gazed in the direction that Saya had run off to. I continued to gaze down at the same street she'd vanished to, my heart beating frantically in my chest.
さてと、それじゃあ私も帰ろっかな。
Hickory said cheerfully after petting Kotaro.
じゃあね、小太郎。お利口にするんだよ。あ、太郎、小太郎のことよろしくね。
Mer.
After the two dogs had their goodbyes,
またね、アキト。
she turned to give me a big wave goodbye before taking off. Short later, with a loneliness not unlike the setting sun, the dogs and I watched Hickory run off. It was the beginning of the week, Monday. Well, all right. We've gotten pretty far in this second video. In fact, I think we've even surpassed the length of the first video. I recalled the whole telescope scene and wanted to get through it from start to finish because it kind of covered the whole part there where he met Hickory. He finally becomes friends with Hickory, and then he settles things with Saya to a point where at the very last scene there she mentions, you know, that she thought she really appreciated that he thought her eyes looked that pretty on first sight. And so with that being said, I think it's time to bring this particular video to a close. A little longer than I'd hoped it would be, but you know, this is a very long game. So I will probably have, I'm hoping this is like the longest of the videos, but who knows. Regardless, I had fun making it. I had fun reading it. I apologize for, I know I have a number of gaffes and everything here, but you know, when it's a game of this size, with this much reading, you're going to have some, and I appreciate you keeping up with me. I hope you are looking forward to the next video, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
No. No. No.